When I think about Ned, I can't help but remember the look on his face when Marge drove over...
Shut up.
Oh, wait. What I'd like to say is, we're still looking for the real killers. Anyway, in conclusion, a man cannot be forced to testify against his wife.
Stop winking.
Hi, everybody, and happy Halloween from the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpsons fans, brought to you by thatshelf.com. I'm abandoning this right now.
I know. I'm always wondering how long you're going to keep.
I said to myself, I'm going to do the whole intro. I'm not doing it, especially because we have a guest, and I'm far too embarrassed to do this in front of him. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpsons joke came from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, the Adam Chainskulls Massacre, and joining me as always is the Helen Shivers to my Julie James, my co-host, Nate Mayer on Elm Street Story. How are you doing today, my friends?
I'm feeling spooky.
Yeah, those spooky names are, look, I'm going to admit it. We had AI help us write those because it's very difficult, and those were the best we could come up with. And with that, I'm not that worried about our AI overlords because some of the results
can't make jokes.
Yeah, some of the results were very pathetic. Granted, I have a very difficult name to make spookies, but regardless. Today we have a very special guest to help us celebrate the spooky season. He's a Canadian film critic and programmer, as well as the host of Someone Else's Movie Podcast. He has served as the senior film writer for Now Magazine and senior international programmer at the Toronto International Film Festival. It's Norm Wilner. How are you doing today, Norm?
I'm fine, thank you. Norm Wilner was right there.
Oh, okay. And you know what? Okay, well, so we were going to ask you, which of the following do you like? Norm Wilner did not come up, and that is better than what we've got. But we've got Children of the Norm Wilner,
That's not
Para-Norm Wilner Activity, or I Know What You Did, Norm Wilner. So which would you...
Okay, whatever. That last one was kind of great. Norm
Wilner. Yeah, again, AI didn't come up with that, so I'm not too worried here. And also, we're now not getting a AI sponsorship for this show ever.
That's fine. It's entirely possible by the time this episode comes out, the bubble will have burst and it'll all be over anyway.
Very true.
One can only hope. On that note, as we sort of alluded to with those spooky names, this week we watched I Know What You Did Last Summer from 1997, which you might remember from such Simpsons episodes as Season 10's Treehouse of Horror 9 and Viva Ned Flanders, and the episode we'll be talking about today, Season 11's Treehouse of Horror 10. But before we get into all of that, I want to get to know you a little bit better, Norm. I mean, I know you because we work together and we've done many of these chats, but for our audience who may not be, super familiar with you and your work, let's also sort of dig into your history with The Simpsons. Like, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn and saying you're a little bit older than Nate and I. How did you come to discover The Simpsons? Was this a show that you've been a fan of for years? Did you fall off of it at any point? What's your story there?
Oh, yeah, I'm old enough that I was watching the Tracy Ullman show. Day one on The Simpsons, I remember Simpsons roasting on an open fire and thinking, oh, this is a new kind of thing. Like, this is
right.
Because I'd seen the Tracy Ullman shorts, the interstitials, and they're clever and funny, but there was only ever one joke per. And you can really see in the animation, just the transition from the shorts to the series, that there's a whole other level of thought being put into it, because obviously you have to if you're asking people to look at this thing for 21 minutes. And people who weren't around at the time don't understand how seismic The Simpsons was.
Right.
In the same way now we take South Park for granted because it's always been there, but there was a period of 6 weeks where The Spirit of Christmas was the most important thing on the planet culturally, and no one talks about that anymore. Like, I have a video, I have the VHS tape, I have one of the ones that was circulated.
Right.
Like, it was sent out promotionally, but it's a VHS tape of The Spirit of Christmas, which is how South Park became South Park. Simpsons was, well, this is a fun little thing from Fox, and this struggling channel is turning to cartoons, and there hasn't been a successful cartoon since the Flintstones in prime time. And it's like the simultaneous sense of history that the original Simpsons episodes had, where they reached back to what those domestic sitcom cartoons used to be in the 50s and 60s, because you're seeing the things that the writers grew up on.
Yeah.
And the outrage that was manufactured immediately after because Bart was such a scoundrel. It's ludicrous to imagine that there was ever, but it was a monoculture, right? Like there was no internet. At best, you had 5 extra cable news channels that would be upset about things. I don't think Fox News even existed yet. But the sense that you were seeing something that people could get upset about, that, you know, a cartoon at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night was somehow causing offense to people because the children were disrespectful to the parents. It's like that is the entire sitcom model. It's simply that it hits harder when your children are watching it with you because you didn't understand this was a cartoon for adults. So you get this first cultural explosion, which then settles down into, well, I guess we just have to live with it. This weird indignity. It's Maud Flanders. The people who didn't like The Simpsons were basically Maud Flanders. And I think they leaned into that in subsequent seasons with the Flanders family to mock the reaction while also slowly, because everything evolves over time and you love what your actors do and the writers write towards their strengths, they slowly turn Ned into a good Christian. I mean, he's blinkered and selfish in his own way, but he's trying to be Christian more successfully than most of the viewers of The Simpsons who claim to be Christian, who were offended by the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing that for Nate and I, whenever we sort of talk with a guest who is of a different era than us.
You can say it. You can say it.
Who's older than us? It is, no, but it is fascinating because, like, again, it premieres in 89. We were born in 88. So, like, there's never been a point in my life that I can remember that The Simpsons hasn't existed. Right. And I came to the show very early on because my dad watched it and I sort of watched it with him, and then it kind of became my show that I watched without him for many years. But so I lived with it for so long, and I was in a household where I was allowed to watch it, but I had friends who weren't allowed to watch it. You know, my wife's family, they were allowed to watch it, but their cousins weren't allowed to watch it. But it's just like, I think, as you say, because it's now been around forever, it becomes easy to forget what a groundbreaking show it was and what an uproar it sort of caused. Now we sort of think about the uproar of being around, like, the fact that, is the show still good anymore? Or the fan commentary has now surpassed the public commentary of, should this thing even exist?
Yeah. Well, I have that relationship to Star Trek because I was born in 68 and it was already on the air to the point where I would watch it in reruns, I guess, like on an afternoon, and just think, this is contemporary. Like, literally, like, this is what shows look like. This is what science fiction looks like. And then I remember one of my earliest memories is being shocked to find out that it wasn't, not a documentary, but like an accurate reflection of where the technology was at this day and age. Because you're a kid and you're playing with toys and you just assume everything is real. And then I must have been 4 or 5, but there was an Apollo mission at the same time, and it was on television. And I had to be told that, no, that's real. Star Trek isn't real.
Right.
And at some level, that probably explains why I became a film critic, because they're like, what is real? What are they doing? How are they lying to me?
Well, on this podcast, we call that the Streetcar Named Desire is not a musical moment.
Yes, I famously asked my dad to buy me the cast recording of a Streetcar Named Desire musical, and he had to inform me, no, you stupid idiot, that's not real.
Well, on that note, Norm, was there ever a movie that you sort of first encountered on The Simpsons, and then when you finally saw it, you were like, oh, that's where that Simpsons joke comes from? Oh,
no. I was already working as a film critic and film student even by the time the show started, so I'd seen everything that they were riffing on. But I'm always amused to see the chatter around a given Criterion title when somebody realizes, oh, I know this scene. Right. And I don't know why I know it. And then they explain to them that it was in The Simpsons, you moron. And then, I think it was Conan O'Brien, maybe, who said that more people have probably seen Citizen Kane through The Simpsons than have actually watched Citizen Kane.
Probably, yeah.
But, culture's a funnel, right? Like, it exists to just sort of put more stuff in.
Well, one of the things that's been so great with this show is getting to, like, talk with the Simpsons writers and producers and sort of understand more about their history, not only working on their show, but also, like, their sort of history with film and pop culture, because that is such a, the two things are so intertwined with this show. But your podcast, Someone Else's Movie, which is now, you're over 500 episodes?
Yeah, 10 years last March.
Wow. So, but you have a similar premise of, what is it about talking with creators about other people's creations that sort of gets you excited?
It all came from a phone interview that I did with Tatiana Maslany in 2013, 14. She'd made a movie called Kaz and Dylan with Richard Dreyfuss, and it was just coming out on DVD, and I was doing some freelance stuff for MSN Simpatico at the time, and they wanted to talk to her because of Orphan Black, which had 2 seasons and had become the thing that it already was. And they wanted to know, the whole point of it was see if you can get her to talk about season 3.
Right.
And so we talked about Kaz and Dylan, and we talked about, she was in, I think, Belfast, shooting Woman in Gold, the Ryan Reynolds movie where she played the young Helen Mirren, which nobody remembers, but she's not bad in it. And we knew each other a tiny bit casually because we're both from Toronto, or she'd been in Toronto for a few years. We'd met once or twice. And I said, okay, this is the bit where I'm supposed to ask you about Orphan Black season 3, but I don't want to know anything myself because I don't want spoilers. I want to see the show and have the show tell me stuff. And she said, oh my God, I'm the same. I hate trailers. I won't watch. I don't even like reading scripts for movies I'm going to be in because I want to see what happens.
Wow.
And she said, and I just saw Under the Skin yesterday, and the only thing I knew about it was they loved it at TIFF. It was Jonathan Glazer, and it was science fiction. I didn't even know Scarlett Johansson was in it. And I said, really? And she's like, no, okay, I knew that a bit. But then because you can't not ask Tatiana Maslany about a performance like Under the Skin, what did you think? And so we talked about that for 4 or 5 minutes. And then we got back. Finally, I realized, okay, you have to go. I have to go. Now that we've laid all this out, what can you tell me about Orphan Black season 3? And she's like, well, I'll say this. The scripts are here and I'm really enjoying them, and we're going to do some new stuff. And there's a couple of things that I never thought, just basic boilerplate.
Yeah.
And then I listened back to the interview to transcribe it the next day. And in the 5 minutes she was talking about Under the Skin, that we were having a conversation about it, she was more herself. I was more myself. And it was a direct line into the artist. Yeah. Because she was appreciating the work, but through her own lens. And it never went to this is what I would have done, because that's not who she is. But also that's just not how artists talk about other artists, right?
No.
They appreciate the thing that they can't do themselves. And that was the key. That was the way into the podcast, because when you were talking about something else, something you didn't make, you inevitably put aside the talking points that you brought with you for your own project. You don't think about yourself in the same way, and you're much more likely to express something about yourself that you wouldn't have elsewhere in any other situation. It's just great to have conversations with people about things they love, because more often than not, it's unpretentious and it's unguarded. I mean, if you listen to the episode Paul Sun-Young Lee and I did on Jaws, we'd never met. We knew each other electronically, through Twitter. But we'd never actually met before. And he came over, and this is a week before Kim's was about to be on the air and change his life forever. And if you listen to the episode, it opens with him showing his kids Ben Gardner's head popping out of the boat. He had it on his iPhone, and he just showed me the clip. And the glee in his voice of frightening his children is so... it's the sweetest thing. And then by the end of the episode, you can actually hear us become friends in real time. And it's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, too, because that's been my experience with doing interviews as well. Is sometimes, I would say actually most of the times, artists are not reluctant to talk about themselves or their work, but I think they struggle with maybe unpacking their way of working. But in that weird way of when you start asking them about the things they like, they can reveal more about what influenced them and how they approach their craft through that avenue of the things that inspired them or the things that they love. And as you say, they open up so much more quickly, because it's like, well, I'm not talking about me now. I'm talking about something I love. It comes across in your show when you hear these artists sort of, getting giddy about something that they love. I mean, that in and of itself, too, it just sort of humanizes these people in a way that press tours very much do not. So, well, on that note, let's get into the Simpsons episode, which, again, Norm, for context, I love The Simpsons. I've watched The Simpsons for years, but whenever I do my rewatches, I tend to skip the Halloween episodes because I'm not watching them at Halloween, and they feel so Halloween-coded that it's like, unless I'm happening to sit down in October, I tend not to watch these. So it is funny.
This is why Adam is the real monster.
Yes, exactly. But the sort of nice thing about it is that whenever we cover one of these episodes on the show, I get to sort of revisit it with the freshest eyes out of any of the episodes we cover because they aren't episodes that I know like the back of my hand. And I have to say I had a lot of fun revisiting this one. Some really fun moments. So Treehouse of Horror 10, directed by Pete Michaels, written by Donna Carey, Tim Long, Ron Hauge, original air date October 31st, 1999, 2 years after the release of this movie. And it's actually, this is one of those rare cases where it aired on Halloween. And I think as a result, I do actually remember watching this because I do remember there being a Halloween where I did my trick-or-treating, I came home, and I watched the Simpsons episode.
Wow. So how old were you in this? 10?
I would have been 11. I would have been 11 years old when this came out. So, yes. And this is the Treehouse of Horror with a parody of I Know What You Did Last Summer, another parody of sort of campy superhero TV shows, which is, I would say, the least scary of maybe the Treehouse of Horror things, but again, this is the one time a year they're allowed to break the format, and I really enjoyed that segment. And then finally, a segment about escaping a doomed Earth, and features the special guests Lucy Lawless, Tom Arnold, and Dick Clark, all as themselves.
One of the other interesting things about this episode is when we crunch the numbers, this is actually one of the episodes that has the most movie references in the first 13 seasons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's number 4 overall. Really, really jam-packed with all sorts of different references. So yeah, we'll get into it.
So, yeah, let's unpack the I Know What You Did Last Summer part of this before we sort of get into the other sections. What is it called? I Know What You Diddly Doodly...
Diddly-id, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, which is always funny. Always, yeah. The diddlies always make me chuckle.
Especially in writing.
Yes, exactly.
That just adds a whole other element. Yeah, so on the commentary, Donna Carey who wrote this segment was basically just like, yeah, so I saw this movie and was like, there you go. And just knew immediately that he could like lift it for a Halloween segment. But the interesting thing is, again, like when you actually go through all of this stuff systematically, you notice this stuff. In Treehouse of Horror 9, Donna Carey's creepy credit is, Donna, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Carey.
Oh, interesting.
So he must have already kind of been thinking about like, oh yeah, I just saw this movie, like I guess at that point it would have been like a year ago or something like that. Right. So it was already kind of stewing. But yeah, this whole segment is just like more or less a front to back parody, right? It starts with the accidental death of Ned Flanders. You have the message written on the door of the Simpson household saying, I know what you did. And the suspicious town folks like, who actually did it? You have the killer with a hook in a fisherman's slicker. Even the score, I think, is a pretty decent sound-alike of the score of this movie. And then this is the part that maybe people, I don't know, may not pick up on quite as much, but much like the ending of this movie, it's a bit of a spoiler, the Simpson family finds out they actually didn't kill anyone.
Right.
Because, as it turns out, Ned Flanders is a werewolf. The one key difference, though, that I did notice was just that... unlike the movie, Homer has absolutely no guilt at all. In fact, he kind of gets a taste for murder and thinks about killing Milhouse, which was pretty good.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's interesting, and we've sort of talked about this before, is how when we started this podcast, we thought there were a lot more of these like front-to-back plot parody episodes than there actually are, and most of them are relegated to Treehouse of Horror parodies. But it's interesting in that they're really just taking the like beats or like sort of the central premise of the film and running with that. And maybe that's because there's not really a lot to pull from in the movie. We're going to get into it, but I didn't really like this movie very much. So
it's not a deep text.
No, exactly.
It's a great hook.
But it is, and yes, well, nice, Nate. Bravo.
I'm sure no one has ever made that joke before.
But it's, as you say, it is a great sort of central conceit that you can build off of. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not going to go full on The Simpsons did it better this time necessarily like I have in the past, but they chose the right elements to riff on and milk for comedy, and also recognized where things are maybe a little bit weaker and chose to go in the route of turning the killer into a werewolf, for example. But...
Yeah, the other funny thing about this plot is that this is also the season where Maude Flanders dies. So they actually have this plot at the beginning of the season where Ned dies and Maude is widowed, and then they do the reverse later in the season, but it's actually serious and not like a Halloween, like, pocket universe situation.
Yeah, lasting ramifications for the rest of the series.
Right. And I think she actually...
it was that early in the run of the series, so she's been dead twice as long as the show's been on the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been dead longer than she had been alive, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And I think it was essentially like, the voice actress wanted to move on from the show. And they were like, well, let's actually like do something with that. And not just like, she just isn't in the show anymore, really. I think in this episode, she's actually already voiced by someone different. If you listen,
yes, I believe she left
funny.
at the beginning of the season. And so there's a couple episodes where she's still on the show and she has a slightly different, well, I think noticeably different voice. But
me too.
And then, of course, the ultimate irony is Maggie Roswell, who provided the voice, she left over sort of like a pay dispute and contract dispute. And basically, like, she was, if my memory serves, she was flying to LA to record, but they weren't paying for her flights. And she was like, can I just record remotely? And Fox was like, no, you have to come in and record in our studio. And so eventually, like, she left. And then I think by like in the early 2000s, she ultimately ends up coming back. But they made the correct decision of not then retconning Maud's death and sort of keeping that as this lasting sort of element to the show, which, they've only done in a few other instances. When you think about, like, it's basically when Phil Hartman tragically passes away, they retire his characters. And then, if I'm not mistaken, they did the same thing with Mrs. Krabappel. Like, she has been retired and no one else has been doing that voice.
Yeah, they got a new teacher in the show. And then Apu, of course. But
and then, yes, the Apu, which, yes,
actor.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's one of these rare instances where they've made like an actual casting-related decision that has had lasting ramifications. And also, they ultimately use for interesting story beats along the way. Analyzing how does Ned Flanders move on without his wife has become sort of an interesting plot point. But okay, so Nate, what are some of the other parodies that are featured within this episode outside of just I Know What You Did Last Summer?
Yeah, so we're going to speed round these because there's too many to talk about in great detail. But in this segment, I Know What You Did, Italy did. We got Weekend at Bernie's with Homer sort of puppeteering Ned Flanders' corpse and trying to pretend he's still alive. We have A Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, with, they look around at all of the townspeople and there's the twins playing jump rope in the front yard. Feels like definitely a nod to a moment in that movie. Oh, yeah. You have a Pet Cemetery, which I think is almost certainly reference to Pet Cemetery. And then there are a bunch of mystery references for this segment, too. So one of the ones I was thinking about, because they use this twice in Treehouse of Horror, is the gag where the lightning strikes and then you see all of the writing on the wall.
Right. Yes,
They do this in this. They also do it in the Shining parody. It's not from either of these movies. So is it just an invention of The Simpsons? Is it a reference to something else? I don't know. Hard to say for me.
I think it's in a few British anthology pictures from the 60s and 70s, like the Amicus movies, House That Dripped Blood and things like that. Because Edgar Wright cites it in his fake trailer for Don't in Grindhouse.
Right.
And I don't think he's leaning on The Simpsons, although he certainly might have been.
Sure.
Because he's also the right age. There's a scene of Nick Frost in a diaper cackling and screaming, and when the lightning flashes, you can see the words "Eat Baby" written on the wall, and it's just the most bizarre thing. I love it so much.
But yeah, that feels like it. You're right, Norm, that it would come from something like that, or like a Hammer movie or something like that, like one of
like
these
an old Dark House kind of thing.
Yeah,
the warning
totally.
that Professor Quatermass has written in his madness on the wall.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. And that makes total sense for the taste of the writers from whatever we know about that.
Right, because they would have been watching these things on like the Midnight Movie or
Exactly.
Zachary introducing them in the 60s and 70s.
Totally. Anything that was airing on TV, it's a good bet that they saw, some version of it. Right. Okay. Abandoned amusement park, obviously a trope. But where does that trope start? I don't know the answer to that question.
Freaks, maybe, Nightmare Alley, like pulpy movies from the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Right, yeah. Sure. Homer says he'll go skinny dipping in the lake where the sexy teens were killed 100 years ago.
I mean,
again, obviously a horror movie trope. Where does it start? Might even be kind of a mashup of two tropes in the sense of like, the teens skinny dipping and then like the event that happened 100 years ago and is coming full circle, kind of mashed together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously sort of a nod to stuff like Friday the 13th, and then, Jaws has teen skinny dipping. The 100 years ago was sort of the added layer to the joke, but yeah, like it's definitely meant to be a generic slasher tropey thing. But I did actually laugh out loud at that joke.
Yeah.
There's an early 80s movie called The Burning with similar vibes.
Right.
Like just the idea that the ground itself is evil and bad things have been happening here forever.
Yes, totally. Yeah, there was one I've seen that has that similar vibe of like, several terrible things have happened over the years, and I was trying to remember what it was, but that makes sense.
There's more than one movie like that.
Yeah, there's a few. Okay, the werewolf part. Do we think that there is any actual movie reference point, or is it just like, we all know what werewolves are?
See, it's funny because I immediately took, and maybe it's just the tone of the episode and everything, I assumed they were riffing on American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, that's where my head went too, but, there's nothing specific.
No, of course.
I have a more obscure pull that they absolutely would have seen. There was an SCTV sketch, like a teenage delinquent thing.
Okay.
You remember the one I'm thinking about?
No.
I want to say it was John Candy as the hero, who's just a kid in a varsity jacket who falls in with the wrong crowd. And this was like the early 1980s, I guess it must have been. Maybe even the late 70s. Oh, no, he's a communist. Like, he falls into communism. It's a teenage delinquent parody where communism is the thing that he gets into.
Of course.
And then at the very end, the way they get out of it is one of the authority figures looks at him in horror and points at him and says, "He's a werewolf!" And it cuts to John Candy as a teenage werewolf. It's just like, yeah, okay, that's how you get out of this joke.
That's
and I
funny.
think that's the reference here.
That is totally plausible as well. This is a call forward to an episode we'll be doing next time around, but it's chillingly plausible. that is the case, because we do know they love SCTV, like a huge influence on their
for
comedy.
sure. That does make a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, I can see somebody in a writer's room just like, how do we get out of this joke? And then someone else going, "He's a werewolf."
Yes, exactly.
And there it is. Well, now I want to watch the sketch again.
How about the sequels to this movie, to I Know What You Did Last Summer? Any influence in this or not? I've seen that claimed online. I think I'm pretty skeptical of that, but...
I mean, no. It's just... The sequels, there's really, really only one. There was an immediate sequel, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which is just, again, there are so many jokes you can make with that title that they didn't make. And I guess I respect them, but I don't respect them because... my OCD just fires into rage. I think my actual review of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer started with like, actually, it wasn't never mind.
Right. I still know what you did 2 summers ago.
Yeah. I every now and then I'll just do a run of those things on Blue Sky, or it used to be on Twitter, but it's like, I continue to be aware of the events of the previous summer, which you now refuse to acknowledge. But like, it's fun. It's so stupid. The idea, I mean, the whole thing is so stupid, but they did an immediate sequel where they go on a vacation to the Bahamas, and that doesn't work out very well.
Right.
And then there was a straight to video follow-up that I think is an original narrative. Like, it's not really a sequel.
Yeah.
Neither is it a reboot.
It's just like, let's tag this as being a sequel, but it has really nothing to do with the events of the original.
Yeah, my impression from the trailer is it is kind of a like, we're going to go skinny dipping at the lake where those kids died 100 years ago sort of feeling.
Yeah, that one was I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yes, it's more Halloween Resurrection than Halloween H2O.
Yeah, the classic Wikipedia excuse of it featured new characters and a different setting. So it's not a sequel then.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the Amazon Prime television series, which absolutely no one remembers, and I never saw.
Wait, that was a thing?
Yeah. It was a year of it. And
that's so funny because I literally, one of my notes is that I was like, I'm really surprised that because obviously there was the sequel that came out this summer. I know what happened. You did. Anyway,
I have not seen.
Yes, no, I'm not trying to make
it.
a this summer parody, but I was like, oh, I'm really surprised that this wasn't like rebooted as like a CW young adult anthology series, but apparently it was just a couple of years ago. So I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah, nobody does. It's still on Amazon if you want to watch it. It's out there.
Wow.
It was produced by James Wan in an attempt at launching just, his Atomic Monster franchise with a big deal with Amazon. And this is, I think, the one thing that came from it that wasn't either already in development or thrust on them to do. And it's an 8-episode series. It is not apparently any good at all or memorable in any way. Like the cast is, if you run them down, most of them don't have multiple credits. Bill Heck is probably the biggest name in it, and he's not a huge name.
Yeah.
You know, he's a stage actor and people respect him and all. He was in The Leftovers, but he's a dad in this one. He's not one of the kids, so it's less interesting, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm looking at this right now, and it's just like this. Apparently
Absolutely
this exists.
forgotten. And it is a straight up adaptation of the novel as well, as opposed to a sequel.
Right.
To any of the other
Interesting.
books. That's the other thing. None of them is really based on the novel. Lois Duncan's book was, I read it in junior high because that's when everybody read it. It was a young adult novel before they had that term about a bunch of kids who accidentally hit someone with a car and then feel bad about it. It's mostly about guilt and the mystery of figuring out who's coming after them. And I don't know if they actually get murdered in the book. I think it's much softer. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I did the research. They don't get killed in the book. There is like a violent conflict, but no one dies.
That sounds more like Lois Duncan. Like they did, Killing Mrs. Tingle. That's an adaptation that doesn't work at all. But again, her stuff just isn't that interesting because it's written for kids, right? The conflicts are all very small and the violence doesn't happen really in a way that's satisfying or interesting. They're very moral, all of her books. What's interesting about the first I Know What You Did Last Summer adaptation is that it does just try to play a slasher game because it's Kevin Williamson. I don't know that this is true. I want to believe it, but it feels to me like Scream came out of his frustration at not being able to get I Know What You Did Last Summer into shape because it was in development for a while and they kept passing on it. It wasn't until Scream was a hit that it was greenlit.
Right.
And Scream is brilliant in its self-awareness, obviously, and its metatext, but it's also what we would now call a Knives Out movie. Like it is a whodunit in a way that most other slashers aren't.
And that's why I love it.
It's great. And that's the thing Williamson does that he doesn't do in I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah.
Because even though it is a whodunit, it don't matter. Like we know it's not the kids, therefore there's no one to suspect that's interesting. And
they kind of play with it just at the very beginning.
5 seconds.
But then they clearly rule people out very, very quickly.
Right. Which is actually something that the new one doesn't do and does it in a fun way is just like there is the possibility that some or all of them might be in on this because they very quickly do the thing that Scream did, which is tease the possibility of more than one killer or at least an accomplice by having someone move very, very quickly.
Right.
I mean, this is again my OCD. When I first saw Scream, I just thought, oh, he got through the window really fast. And then never thought about it again because that's what you come to expect from slasher movie rules, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's always right behind you. Right. And then the longer Scream goes on, the more realistic it obviously has to be about, even just getting shot and falling down. People don't miraculously get up again. That's the problem with those sequels is that they drift into this increasingly unreal thing where the concept cannot handle the weight of the real world stuff that they want to bring to it.
Right.
But with I Know What You Did Last Summer, the original adaptation, it's just like, well, 4 kids, 1 killer. What are you going to do? Like, it's really simple. And that brings out the best in Williamson, even though he can't do the meta stuff that he wants to do.
Yeah.
It all comes through in the casting with, Sarah Michelle Gellar being a victim instead of a hero. But it's an interesting engine for the story, which, like, it's not a good movie. But it's enjoyable and it's beautifully shot.
Well, yes.
Well, for 1997, there's a drought of slasher films. We aren't experiencing the explosion that would follow after Scream. This was the first one, really, and it came out almost a year later. Obviously, the comparison here would be a Scream sequel. It's the thing you think you want from a Scream sequel.
Yeah.
You want
and this comes out like I think the same year as Scream 2. It's like right in that same ballpark.
Scream 2 is
Scream
on its
2 comes
heels.
out in December, and this came out in October.
Yeah.
So it's like they're probably being like made concurrently.
Yeah,
Totally.
I think the only reason Summer comes out first is because the script already existed.
Exactly.
Like, they didn't know Scream was going to be the thing that it was, and so no one expected to have to do more of them.
Yeah.
This was going to be Columbia's way of doing it, and cheaply, right? Like it cheats everything. They're shooting it in California and saying it's North Carolina, where sure, North Carolina has cliffs. But the thing that works about it is that it is a single track. It's a train moving in one direction. It is not trying to do the things that Scream did. You can see Williams flirting with it here. Like he wanted to add them back in after Scream started to take off. And very rightly, I think, Sony said, maybe not. Or was it even Sony then? Columbia Pictures. Neil Moritz, who's the producer, his name is on all of them, is really good at understanding what it is the story is, as opposed to Wes Craven, who by that point in time, like New Nightmare is like a dry run for Scream, where it's all about what the thing is to the people experiencing it as well as the audience. It's great. And nobody gives it enough credit. But Craven had the power at that point to just say, no, I don't think I want to make a B movie. I want to make an A movie. I want to make a movie with ideas on top of the story. And Moritz here is just like, I don't know. It's a guy in a raincoat and a hook. Let's just focus on that.
For sure.
Play up the scares and make set pieces out of the deaths and do the sort of slasher picture that isn't happening right now. That Friday the 13th movies are long, dead. They've stopped working. The Nightmare on Elm Street films ran out of gas, and then they came back with New Nightmare, but that was it. That was the end of it, very clearly. There aren't a lot of conventional, straight-up, old-school slasher movies. There are horror films at this time, but Scream and Summer and Scream 2 were really the only ones in the arena at that point. And what Moritz did was he hired an Australian director, Jim Gillespie, to just come at it from a stylish place and make them fun and interesting and involve the audience without nodding or winking or referencing. It's a straight slasher movie, which worked then and now feels really dated, right? Because all the subsequent Scream movies have sort of steered the slasher film into more self-aware directions, and then the subsequent reboot waves, like bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis for Halloween sequels and all of that stuff, they beat that to death. So to see one that has absolutely no aspirations other than delivering a couple of shocks and some really nice cinematography, it's a gorgeous movie.
Looks
especially
great.
now compared to the stuff that we're seeing these days.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
Sure.
I watched this movie like back in June in prep for this, and then was like, I probably should refresh my memory because I think it's a pretty forgettable movie, to be honest.
Sure.
So last night I watched the movie at 2x speed, but with the director's commentary on.
The way it was intended, of course.
Yes, exactly. But what I will say is it actually gave me a new appreciation for the movie because I have more appreciation for just how they made it, which it sounds like, as you said, Norm, like they did it on the cheap and as quickly as possible. But by not paying attention to the pretty creaky plot and what I would say is not particularly strong performances and just focusing on the visuals while I have the director talking to me, I was able to go, damn, this movie does actually look really, really good. It's just a shame that that's all it really has going for it.
I do want to bring us back to the episode. Now that we firmly established that, no, there are no references to the sequels, including the Amazon Prime series in this episode. Let's briefly talk about the other segments in this Treehouse of Horror. You did mention, Adam, you wanted to talk a little bit about segment 2, Desperately Zeeking Xena.
I don't want to unpack it because I do want to get to the movie sooner, but obviously it's not a particularly scary bit. It's more a sci-fi bit than it is a horror bit. But it is interesting because it's this classic thing of Treehouse of Horror is the only opportunity the writers really get to go really elastic with the narrative of The Simpsons. And yes, well, to be able to break the canon, to be able to break whatever they've done before and to do something as wacky as this. And then just, at the end of the segment, everything's back to normal. So it's fun to see Bart and Lisa as 60s era comic book heroes doing wacky things, getting into, Batman 66 style adventures with the Collector.
Well, so that's the interesting thing about this is that when I was looking at this online, no one had identified Batman as a parody for this.
Oh, interesting. I mean, they literally do the
crazy.
It couldn't be more obvious.
Yep. But it's I think because they don't say it on the commentary and it's sort of framed as a broader parody, right, of that type of show.
Yeah.
But there's
TV aesthetic kind of thing.
Right, but there's actually so many specific, the score, that sort of Mickey Mouse is the fighting, the interstitials, and even just the way the Collector enters is classic Batman 66 villain entrance vibes. The Fantastic Four, I feel is a reference in this, right? Bart as, Mr. Fantastic, basically.
Dude.
And Lisa, even though she's not the Thing, she is called Clobber Girl, which does feel like a nod as well to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Two other ones quickly in this that were interesting. The Phantom Menace, of course, right?
Yes.
But apparently they were writing this before the movie had come out. So all they knew was that there was going to be a double-edged lightsaber.
Well, hey, you know what? They
saw
made
the
a lot.
trailer.
They made a lot of bank off of that. If memory serves, I had a lot of double-edged lightsaber toys before the movie came out. So
Totally.
Yeah. Didn't Weird Al Yankovic do this parody song the same way? Like he did it from the trailer. He hadn't seen the movie.
Yes,
when
I
he wrote
believe
it?
that is true. Yes,
I think everyone just knew it was going to be a huge thing. Like whether it was good or bad, it was just going to be a cultural moment. So you had to take advantage.
I have to tell my Phantom Menace story
Yeah.
because it's so I love this story so much. It's so nerdy. I went to the press screening, which was a preview screening at the Eglinton Theatre of blessed memory in Toronto, which I think it seated 700. Massive theater. Had a balcony and a gorgeous room. And it was the first public screening of a Star Wars movie since 1983, right? So the expectations were massive. And it was maybe the single saddest experience of my life.
no.
Because I was excited. I mean,
We all
I was
were.
skeptical, but I was excited. But there were children there, and to listen to the cheers and the applause at the beginning just taper off slowly until it was just the kids in the pod race. Like the volume and the register. By the end of it, it's like the only people who were having a good time were people whose voices hadn't broken yet.
Right. Jesus Christ.
And it was just like you just walk out and nobody looked at each other. It's like old stories of people coming out of porn theaters where it's just this shared experience was so unpleasant in memory that I don't ever want to think about it again. And it was just the saddest thing.
Yeah,
we went on a
that checks
field
out.
trip. It was a grade 5 end of the year field trip because our teachers were like, this is a cultural event. This has not happened in 20 years or whatever. And I remember sort of having a similar experience of walking out and me and my friends being like, that wasn't great, was it? Like we didn't have, an adult's perspective, but even as 11-year-olds or whatever we would have been, just being like, I don't know, that wasn't what I was hoping it would be.
Yeah. And one of those, like, it's kind of like the first time you watch a Simpsons episode, you're like, oh, I don't think that was actually very good. Like, whenever that is for you, right? In the seasons after season 10. But yeah, it's just that feeling of like, oh, Star Wars can be bad? Oh, I didn't realize that. I mean,
granted,
the loss of innocence.
We maybe didn't know how good we had it. There's an argument to be made that maybe it's not all bad, but yeah, that's really sad, Norm. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's
sorry
okay.
for your loss.
I was able to cope.
Yes.
Well, here's another sci-fi of the era reference in this as well as Battlestar Galactica. And the collector calls out that he's doing some kind of pose from Battlestar Galactica, but no one online I have seen has been able to figure out what the hell it's actually a reference to.
Lucite hardening must end life in classic Lorne Green pose from Battlestar Galactica. Oosh! Eesh. Best death ever!
I think part of the issue is people assume that it's a death moment from Battlestar Galactica because he says he's dying. The collector says he's dying. But I don't think it is. I think it's a pose from the movie that he's using as he's dying. But they're two separate things. But no one's named it.
Well, when I looked up yesterday, because I was also like, wait, what? What is this? Someone online, and I couldn't confirm this, but someone online says it's a reference to a coffee commercial that Lorne Green did.
But
I was like,
again,
what?
like that's
what?
I mean, Lorne Green did do coffee commercials.
That would make more sense.
But it's like, I looked up some of these coffee commercials. He's kneeling down, but he's not doing that pose.
Yeah.
So I feel like it is probably a reference to something, but no one's done the screen capture,
Right. Norm, was he in the TV series?
Lorne Green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't just in the movie, right?
The movie is the pilot.
Or the movie is a backdoor pilot?
Right.
No, the movie is the pilot. They just released it theatrically.
Okay.
It has a different ending. They kill the villain who ends up being the antagonist in the entire series.
Gotcha.
Right.
But it is the first 2 episodes of the show. And not good. I mean, again, just not that good.
Norm just out there with the hot takes.
I was there. Like that's talk about a 10-year-old being disappointed. I saw that in the theater and it's just like, this is television. You can
Yeah.
That's valid.
For sure.
Now, I've only seen the sci-fi reboot and only the first season of it, which, if memory serves, is great.
the whole
but-
series is great.
But I've never watched the original, though I do remember
Same.
when the DVDs came out. in the height of DVDs are the coolest shit ever era, and it came in a box that was the head, like it was a head of
the Cylon head,
of the Cylon,
Oh, yeah.
and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want it. But I never did end up buying that. So
it's just as well. No, I mean Battlestar Galactica. Talk about people thinking I Know What You Did Last Summer is a Scream knockoff. It's the result of Scream, absolutely. But the people making I Know What You Did Last Summer understand what it is and what it's supposed to be. And
Right.
Battlestar Galactica is, what if we just do a space thing and have a lot of cocaine available? Because everything is glittery. There's a disco. There's gambling and casinos. Like, it's just a bunch of stuff that's been thrown into a blender and called sci-fi.
I don't know. You're selling it pretty hard.
I know.
It
It's like,
sounds-
now we need to cover it.
In
Sounds
retrospect, it's a
good.
fascinating cultural artifact. Kate and I have been watching a lot of 70s movies, and here and there you'll find something where it's like there was no answer. There was just
Right.
a lot of blow.
Right.
And it gave someone the confidence to make whatever this third act is.
That's funny.
But
Yeah,
but you can
totally.
see, and I've written about this a couple of times over the years, the thing that is so special about Star Wars as a cultural force, as a creative impact, is that it, like Scream, in fact, derails everything else. It changes
Right.
the way people see and relate to its genre
Right.
in a way that is like aggressively detrimental to everything else around it. You think about Logan's Run, which was released the year before Star Wars, and is not like, it's not fondly remembered except for Jenny Agutter being naked, which, again, yes, if you're 8, it's remarkable
Yeah, well, fair enough.
to see that in a PG movie, because that was a different time. But everything else about it is like, there's cross filters on everything, and they glisten, and the guns don't, they
Shot in a
fire
shopping
light
center.
bolts. It's a mall. Like, the future is a mall, which absolutely. But it's so badly organized and poorly put together, and it's just like, it's the Krusty line, right? That'll hold the little SOBs. This is what people think the kids want.
Right. Totally.
And that's what Battlestar Galactica was, and that's what a lot of the films that followed Scream were. Like Urban Legend, which isn't bad, but is very, very definitely Scream again. Like, just more
Yeah.
stuff. And Scream is Kevin Williamson, and Kevin Williamson understands the mechanics of this genre and how it's supposed to work, and he can make fun of it while still making the deaths count.
Yep.
And that sort of carries over into I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think that's why the Simpsons episode that parodies it does keep the skeleton of it. Like, the structure is solid.
Yeah.
And then it's simply a matter of telling this type of story really well without getting fancy,
Yeah.
which is why the movie works. And also, incredibly, why the movie looks like it doesn't work now, 30 years later, because every other movie has been riffing on the same idea. And, there's no self-awareness in I Know What You Did Last Summer. It comes up to it really, really briefly.
Right.
But that's not what this movie is. And so it was seen as a disappointment, and it was seen as a cash grab, which, yes, it kind of was. But it also is its own thing. And if you view it as removed from Scream, like if it had been released in the summer of 1996, it would look like one of the movies that Scream came to kill.
Right.
That means
Totally,
it's
yeah.
a functioning object of its earlier version, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
100%.
an interesting point. Yeah.
Is there anything we want to say about the third segment in this Treehouse of Horror? Less of a movie parody heavy segment, I think. I mean, it's one of those ones that feels like it's probably referencing like a Twilight Zone episode I haven't seen.
The only thing I want to say is they do Spike Lee real dirty, and
They really do.
I don't
They
understand
came for him.
Yeah, and I don't understand why. And I again, Norm, for context, what was Lee's reputation in '99? Because obviously, he's made what I would consider 2 of his best films, but was he seen as like an enfant terrible, or why would The Simpsons come so hard for him? Because it's not like he's making bad movies at this point. He's made arguably his best movies, but is he in a dry spell?
He was actually, yeah.
Okay.
Now that I think about it, like Girl 6, which is not a bad movie, but he'd made movies that didn't make money.
Right.
Or set the critics on fire. I think the last couple, Crooklyn and Malcolm X, were reasonably well received. And then, unless I'm missing something really obvious, this was the port where he starts sliding into doing a lot of stuff for different studios because He wasn't seen as unsuccessful, but the fact that Malcolm X just didn't get the Oscars that it should have gotten, was, or even the nominations, was perceived, I think, as a failure on his part, which totally unfair. And the whole system, I mean, that's the year of Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction, a serious, dramatic biopic. He's going to struggle regardless.
Yeah.
But so I'm looking it up, and it's like the movie that came out that year was Summer of Sam, which is maybe it's had a retroactive reassessment, but like
it's not bad, but it bombed. It bombed hard.
Yeah.
And
so
I think and I'm wrong about Malcolm X. Malcolm X was 92, not 94. He was in the weeds. Clockers was a bomb.
Right.
That was the one he followed Crooklyn with, and I think that was his last film at Universal for a while, and then he kind of worked for like Fox Searchlight and for like Summer of Sam is Disney. And at that time, Spike Lee working for Disney did feel like a terrible match, although it gave us 25th Hour, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think also the writers are a little allergic to self-seriousness. And I do love Spike Lee and I love his work, but he is very self-serious, right? He talks a big game, but often delivers on that big game. And so I think that might be also part of why they're coming after him, is like anyone who sees themselves, I guess, as great, they often are going to come after.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the only thing I could think of. I had no cultural context when I first saw this episode of like who Spike Lee was. I was more familiar with some of the other people they're making fun of in that segment, but
it's the idea that you're putting Spike Lee in the same, I was going to say the same boat, but in this case, the same ship as Tom Arnold and Rosie O'Donnell. And I like Rosie, so I think they're doing her dirt, but I understand. But yeah, it's just like, this doesn't seem fair to the man, but anyway.
Yeah.
It does feel like a weird pull.
Yeah. All right, we've already sort of been talking about it, but let's more explicitly get into the movie itself. Norm, how would you sum up this movie in a sentence?
Why, I happen to have one on the box. Is this where you're going? Yes, I am tied to I Know What You Did Last Summer because Columbia Pictures poll quoted my Toronto Star review in 1997 and turned it into a way more enthusiastic. So on the back of every single goddamn release of I Know What You Did Last Summer, VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, and now 4K, you will see a pure fright machine bracket that scares the hell out of you, ! Norman Wilner, Toronto Star. I did write those words, but not in that order. They're pulled from two separate paragraphs. In which I was a little more equivocal. What I did say was, in one paragraph, that Jim Gillespie pulls out all the stops. I think it was Gillespie specifically, but it was the production. Pulls out all the stops to create or make a pure fright machine. So
Okay.
By implication, that means there are other things that are not in it, like character and complexity. It was within the context of what the movie wants to do.
Right.
And to that end, like 2 graphs or 3 graphs later, I said something like, all it wants to do is scare the hell out of you. And someone at Columbia Pictures took those words and stitched them together, added an S onto scare, which is fine, I guess, but and created this pull quote, a pure fright machine that scares the hell out of you, which I did not say. But I kind of love that I am truly immortal because it's on because the movie was a hit and it's endured. Like it keeps coming back. Yeah. And every time they put
that quote is still on the 4K re-release. Like it's
right here.
You've got your VHS copy there and it's on that and it's withstood the test of time that they keep pulling it. So, I mean,
it's so silly.
I guess, so we know how you felt about it then. How do you feel about it now? How do you think the movie has aged?
Well, I mean, obviously, everything about it screams late 90s, as will always happen, right? The weirdest thing I've learned is that the films that stand the test of time best, that aren't classics, like the middling projects of any era, tend to be period pieces because they don't date as badly. You just get a sense of how people perceived a period at a given time, and then it becomes like almost archaeological. Right. You're digging up a way of seeing that doesn't exist anymore. I Know What You Did Last Summer does not have that going for it. It is very much who is pretty right now and how can we put them in a fluffy towel.
Right.
But it also speaks to what studio films used to look like, even middling ones, even ones that didn't have a lot of money. And when the remake came out this summer, people were posting on Blue Sky about, oh, I went back and I looked at the original, and my God, movies looked so different. And it looks like, yeah, because it's shot in scope by someone who loves anamorphic photography, lens flares everywhere, but they don't feel like they're a gimmick. It just feels like a John Carpenter movie 20 years earlier. And that's why I think it still does function. It's dated and it's silly, no question. But it also still is a little intense when it needs to be, and it's well made and artfully shot. And that sadly goes a really long way right now.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Well, and we're definitely going to get into it, but I think the Scream sort of recalibrated everybody's brains as to what a slasher movie is.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, like this, if you take Scream out of the equation and you go back to the movies like Friday the 13th or like Prom Night, like this is it's just as good as all of those. It's just they're not meant to be high art. They're just dumb popcorn fun. And so when you look at it with that lens, if it had come out the same summer as Scream, it looks like a movie that Scream is coming after. But the fact that it comes out after Scream, you judge it accordingly. In many ways, I think Scream ultimately breaks the genre, for better or for worse, however you want to look at that. But Nate, had you seen this prior to this? Like, did you?
Yeah, I'd seen it. So I think actually my wife and I had a similar sort of like marathon to what you were saying, Norm, about 70s movies. We were like, oh yeah, let's go back and watch all those like 90s teen slasher movies, right? So of course, I mean, I'd seen Scream many, many times. Love Scream. But yeah, then we went back and we watched this. We watched, I think, 2 urban legend movies. There was the first one, and then I think it's the third one maybe that some people also like, because I think it takes place in film school, an even more like Kevin Williamson sort of like vibe, right? Of like, how much more meta can we get this, right? They scratch an itch, right? They're fun, even when they're not particularly great. And of course, they are often these like vehicles for young stars at that time who then go on to have completely different careers, right? Like Urban Legend also has, what's his name? The Joker.
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto. There you go. Playing the love interest, which is hilarious now to think about. But yeah.
Paul Rudd was in Halloween 6,
right?
As Tommy Jarvis, the traumatized Tommy Jarvis. Basically, it's the same story that Jamie Lee Curtis would play in the Halloween reboot.
Yeah, basically,
but not nearly
like,
as good.
Devin Sawa was in the first Final Destination. Like, yeah, it's all these, as you say, Nate. Like, it's a jumping off point for the hot teen stars of the time.
Right.
And usually moving from, like Sarah Michelle Gellar, moving from TV to this, can they sustain a big budget Hollywood movie, or are they going to falter? Which obviously you look at someone like Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt. Some of them have more success than others in making that transition.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it, but Freddie Prinze Jr. is very interesting because you know what I know him from? Video games.
Oh.
He voices like one of my all-time favorite video game characters.
I did not know that.
The Iron Bull from Dragon Age Inquisition, which is like, Norm's looking at me like I'm speaking Greek. But
well, I just like, isn't he in the Wing Commander movie?
Possibly. I don't know. But
which no one remembers.
But like that character is like incredible. And like he's doing something that you would never ever guess that it's him because it doesn't sound anything like he sounds in this movie. But he plays like an 8-foot tall bull man with an eye patch who is also like a kinky spy.
Okay, sure.
If I had to summarize it in a couple words.
Totally. That tracks.
Anyway, it's really good.
That thing you just said. You shouted it during the fight, too. What does it mean?
Oh, Tarsadathan Halsam. Closest translation would be, I will bring myself sexual pleasure later, while thinking about this with great respect.
You shouted that while it was breathing fire at us?
I know, right?
So he found his way. It just wasn't as a movie star.
Well, Norm, we've already alluded to it, and since you have it handy, do you mind just reading the plot synopsis from the VHS of I Know What You Did Last Summer for our audience who maybe aren't super familiar with the film?
Even this plot synopsis is going to sound overcomplicated, frankly. Okay, here's the box. Jennifer Love Hewitt from TV's Party of Five and Sarah Michelle Gellar, Scream 2, star with Freddie Prinze Jr., Ryan Philippe, or is it Philippi?
Philippi, yeah.
And Johnny Galecki in this terrifying tale of a body that just won't stay dead. After an accident on a winding road, 4 teens make the fatal mistake of dumping their victim's body into the sea. But exactly 1 year later, the dead man returns from his watery grave, and he's looking for more than an apology. From the writer of Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer is a pure fright machine that scares the hell out of you. Norman Wilner, Toronto Star.
Hey, I know that guy.
See,
Yeah. Now they just go with, this is the 4K version. Last summer, 4 friends made a desperate pact to conceal a shocking secret, but now someone has apparently learned the truth.
Right, so this is the interesting thing for me. After rewatching it this time, I didn't feel like this was really a slasher movie. I mean, it is. There are tropes that it's pulling from a slasher movie. I think it's a ghost movie. And the original VHS description actually is much more of a ghost movie sort of description, because it actually doesn't make it a whodunit at all. It says the body didn't die and is coming back to haunt them, basically.
Right.
And a lot of what happens in this movie is more like hauntings than killings, right? It starts to go in that direction at the end, and they, after test viewings added one in near the beginning, but like a lot more of it is just like your hair is mysteriously cut. It would almost work better if they leaned more into that, in my opinion. So anyway, that's my hot take on the description.
Well, I think the idea of kids being tormented by their conscience as much as by an actual tormentor is really interesting. And that's definitely the book.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
But
and
Williamson
that
just
to me,
keeps thinking, what else can I add? What can I do that's more cinematic than just somebody sitting there looking worried?
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Nate, we've sort of alluded to little bits and pieces of it, but talk us through the sort of origins and production of this film, just so that we have the full context.
Sure. Yeah, so as we've been talking about, it's based on a book by Lois Duncan, came out in 1973, and one of the producers, Stokely Chaffin, remembers, much like you, Norm, like reading it in like 5th grade and immediately loving it and remembering it fondly. And so she and her fellow producer, Eric Feig, take it to Mandalay to get it made. And as you said, after a lot of delay, eventually the story is given to Kevin Williamson to actually turn it into a script. And obviously Williamson was really having a moment. So the way they tell it in the sort of behind the scenes, Williamson's script for Scream was already making the rounds in Hollywood under its original title, Scary Movie. Which, yeah, that's what that movie is referencing.
Yep.
This movie ends up coming out between Scream and the premiere of Williamson's other claim to fame, Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
And in fact, eagle-eared watchers of this movie will notice that they actually call the place where they go and hang out and tell urban legends, they call it Dawson's Beach in this movie. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, so just the timeline of this, Scream comes out December of 1996. This comes out October 17th, 1997. And then Dawson's Creek is January 20th, 1998. So Kevin Williamson is just...
he's on fire.
He's on fire, right. So, but I was curious, Norm, like, was Kevin Williamson someone who people like knew about at the time, or was that all happening kind of behind the curtain?
After Scream. If I remember correctly, Craven was the real draw for Scream until it opened, and then people just realized what the script was. And it's like a Shane Black situation, maybe somebody who's been working in the background but doesn't really explode until one thing happens. And with Black, it was Lethal Weapon. But he's in Predator as an actor, and he'd co-written or developed Night of the Creeps with Fred Decker, and their names are the Monster Squad too. It was something else. Like, he was a genre guy in horror and sci-fi, and wrote Lethal Weapon, which then became a monster. And then every script that he wrote, every movie that got made, it was sold on his name instead of the director's name. And that's kind of what happened with Williamson.
Right.
Where the awareness of I Know What You Did Last Summer was mostly, oh, it's the guy who wrote Scream. It's going to be good. And
Jim Gillespie wasn't the draw?
Yeah, I got it wrong. I have to apologize. Jim Gillespie is Scottish, not Australian. I have no idea why I thought he was Australian, but I've thought that for 30 years.
Right. Because, I mean, like, Jim Gillespie, he's not known for much at this time. He had a short movie that he made for the BFI called Joyride, which is actually on the DVD, which I think is hilarious. It's so strange. Like, you just never see that sort of thing. But that was sort of his calling card, and that was it. And as far as I could tell, it seems like Williamson maybe recommended Jim Gillespie, or at least knew who he was. And
interesting. Okay.
But that's how the connection
effect, right? Like, a short film that actually does impress people will get you work, or at least it did at the time. Now I guess you have to have a massive social media following before you
but the thing that's really crazy, and like, we haven't gotten to this section of the discussion yet, so I don't actually know how successful this movie was, but the fact that Gillespie goes on to make nothing else, essentially. Like, he works on a couple films, but, like, they don't exist effectively.
He works with Stallone?
Yeah,
on
Detox.
On Detox? That's probably the next big thing.
Like, I looked at his filmography and was like, it's tiny. It's like 7 films.
Yeah.
If that.
At first, I looked at his filmography and I was like, he directed Venom? And I was like, oh, no, not that Venom.
not that Venom. Different Venom.
But what is interesting, though, about Gillespie's work is, at least in Detox and Venom, they are really well cast. He's working with genuine actors. I mean, Detox stars Stallone, but it's also got Tom Berenger and Charles S. Dutton and Robert Patrick and Stephen Lang and Jeffrey Wright and Chris Christopherson. And it's just about a bunch of guys in I forget where it is, but it's the snowbound detox facility where everybody is suffering from some kind of massive problem in addition to substance abuse, and they all end up being stalked by a killer, which obviously is why he got the gig.
Right.
But he was, for a little while, he was bouncing around projects as the guy who can make stuff look good. And he just didn't get a lot of stuff off the ground. But then in the Venom, which was one of those Miramax quickies where they just, again, like, we're still throwing a bunch of really pretty people into movies and hoping it turned into something. Agnes Breckner is in there, and this is just after Blue Card, and she was a huge, like, serious actor. Jonathan Jackson's in it, Laura Ramsey, Megan Good, Method Man.
Of course.
And I want to say that was like a Wes Craven Presents situation, but I could be wrong.
Interesting. I mean, it is fascinating because for all my reservations about this movie, nothing about it seems like it should put someone in, like, director's jail. And, like, by all accounts, listening to the commentary, this guy is, well, okay, we'll get into it. But by all accounts, listening to the commentary, like, he sounds like he's an intelligent filmmaker and a talented filmmaker and a filmmaker who works quickly. So, like, if you need to, like, even the fact that he just didn't do more spin-off sequel movies is strange to me. Like,
it's not strange to me, and we'll get into it in a moment.
Well, let's get into it then.
But, okay, so just before we do that, I do want to say, like, Williamson does obviously adapt the book quite a bit, right?
Right.
And one of the things, as we talked about, is the fact that there isn't a slasher in the book, but there is sort of hauntings, right? The other element he adds is the whole fisherman thing. And the town as well, which is very Jaws-coded, I would say.
Yeah, they have fun with that.
So, in terms of the production of this movie, the movie is shot in 10 weeks, in March of 1997, with 7 weeks of night shoots.
Oof. Oh, boy. Not ideal.
Yep. And so that's June or July, right, if you're counting. And then it's released in October of the same year. So, incredibly quick turnaround. And this is why I do think that there may be some reasons why he got into director's jail. The movie itself, again, I agree. I think it looks great. It's very economical. We can talk about that. But it really sounds like it was quite a dangerous production, frankly. When you hear about the behind-the-scenes stories, even the stories that Jim Gillespie tells on the commentary, when you add it all up, you're like, something seems not great. And if you look at the behind-the-scenes featurettes on the DVD, you'll notice that only some of the cast is actually present.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Only Jennifer Love Hewitt, I think, appears on the behind the scenes, and the rest of the cast.
Now, are these contemporary or are these?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they are retroactive.
Because I know that one of the things they talk about, one of the challenges is that Sarah Michelle Gellar is also shooting Buffy at the same time, and so they had to deal with her hair for the scene where she loses her hair. But
it's
not
just
because
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Okay,
it's everyone.
Interesting. Okay,
it's everyone.
Interesting.
So just to name a couple specific instances. So in her big chase scene, right, Sarah Michelle Gellar gets splinters all over her hands from pulling the elevator rope, which was something that Gillespie sort of improvised once he got to the set. He's like, oh, cool, that elevator, let's integrate that. But didn't think through what the implications would be for the actors, right? Freddie Prinze Jr. lost all of the skin on his hands from sliding down a rope in the big climax. He also claims he had a near-death experience when the director told the stunt coordinator to go home, and then they shot a scene with Prinze riding a motorized dinghy over a big wave. He flipped out of the boat and nearly hit his head on the motor.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then after the stuntman refused to do a setup because it was unsafe, Muse Watson, who plays the fisherman, was pulled up a mast at 40 miles per hour towards the camera, stopping inches away from the lens. Watson's the one who's swinging back and forth on that rope. above the boat deck, screaming to the point where he broke all of the blood vessels in his eye, kind of like that moment where Homer does the same thing when he gets right on his face.
No!
What is it?
Nothing.
So all that stuff is happening on this set. Freddie Prinze Jr. in particular is like, I will never work with this guy again. And of course, he ends up with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yep.
Right. And Ryan Phillippe, it sounds like, was a friend of theirs on set and kind of like continued a relationship afterwards. So that's my guess at why they're not in the featurette. And I have no idea. This is just speculation, but I wonder if that has something to do with why he didn't have a bigger career after this movie that, you know, did make a lot of money.
I'm skeptical just because in the late 90s, having a $125 million hit in a genre picture is enough to get you more work no matter what you do. Like, you could probably kill someone on a set.
I was going to say, and speaking from experience, like, safety is less of a concern than you would think. And as Norm says, if you can make the studio money, even if you're being a little bit unsafe, I don't know.
But even if you piss off the stars?
Well, I mean,
but they're these stars, right? Like, they're not, and no disrespect to the people in the movie, but they're not A-list, like, massive Tom Hanks. Like, I mean, let's be reasonable about this. In 1997, Miramax was winning Best Picture Oscars.
Like, that's very true.
Morality and safety were not huge
exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, it is an interesting question to ask, like, what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, the other weird thing from the set is in 2018, Jennifer Love Hewitt gives an interview where she claims that the scene where she yells at the clouds was directed by a child who won a competition to direct a scene or something. On set.
What are you waiting for, huh?
In 2025, Vulture investigates this story, and everyone else involved with the production is like, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. That never happened. There was never a child on set during that scene. There was no contest. There's no evidence of a contest. So the question is, what the hell is that about? Did she just make it up? Did she misremember? No one knows.
That's very... Yeah.
This one sort of tilts towards the idea of Gillespie maybe not being the most responsible, because if I was trying to get a given performance out of an actor and I didn't care, I would say something like, I don't know, a kid wrote it. And, you know, the studio wants this because...
Oh, interesting.
Well, but it's funny.
A good moment.
In the commentary, he says he actually went and shot a close-up because her performance was so strong. He felt like, I guess originally it all was supposed to play out in the wide. And he's like, no, I need to give her a close-up because, like, she's giving it her all here. So, like, it clearly was thought about and planned out. And I don't think a child did it. But that's a weird thing to claim. But
just, totally strange. One of those mysteries we may never, ever get an answer to.
I believe that she believes it.
Fair enough. Well, that's pretty generous.
Yeah. All right, Nate. Well, again, maybe this is the reason. How did this movie do? Like, was it a success? Like, it obviously spawned a sequel, so I have to imagine it made some money.
Yep. So budget is $17 million, and it makes $125 million globally, $72 million domestic.
Okay.
So it is a big hit, especially on that budget, for sure. Norm, I was curious, do you remember what was like the top of the box office that year, 97?
Oh, I do, amazingly, because I just did a podcast about it. It was Men in Black.
Ah, yes.
Titanic counts as 98 because of the window when it was released. Mm-hmm. It opened after Thanksgiving, and that's when they stopped taking box office returns for a given year. But no, Men in Black was number one.
Yeah.
Also from Columbia.
Yeah.
They had a good year.
There you go.
That movie rules. So
I love that movie.
It's great. I had Seth Worley on the show to because Sketch. Oh, okay, Sketch is amazing. If people haven't seen it,
I'm so excited for Sketch. Yeah,
it's just wonderful, delightful, like heir to Spielberg in the 80s. Like, it's what Stranger Things would have been if the Duffer Brothers had been willing to try an original idea instead of just build it out of references.
Another hot take from Norm Wilner today.
Not a new observation.
No,
but it's
sure.
got a sense of play and fun and kids and monsters and adult emotions and stuff. It's so good. And Seth just wanted to talk about nothing other than Vincent D'Onofrio as Edgar the Bug and the the glee that movie has. And again, it's a self-aware, I'm not going to do a whole Type 5 on Men in Black, though I have one, but Men in Black is similarly like a self-aware genre project that requires the audience to pay attention and buy in, much like Scream had done 6 months ago. So clearly something's in the air, right? Like,
for sure.
There's a trend towards smarter, more thoughtful pulp is happening. And I guess that's all post-Tarantino probably, right? But they're just trying it out in different iterations, different genres, see what else sticks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and on that note, some other self-aware things that are coming out right now. Lost World Jurassic Park. Liar, liar. Yeah, maybe not quite as smart as those movies. Air Force One, a movie I love.
That is not self-aware in the slightest.
Not in the least. Not in the least.
I think it would cease to function if it had a thought about. Wait a minute,
it might implode. Yeah. Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope is re-released.
Special edition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. My Best Friend's Wedding. Titanic just releasing at the end of the year here. Face Off. Batman and Robin, a movie I kind of have a real soft spot for.
the best comedy of the 1990s, according to date.
Yes.
I always thought that Clooney was a good Bruce Wayne. Like, he got something about that character that none of the others, even Keaton, didn't. Because Keaton just plays Wayne as a shell.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of an integrated Batman and Bruce Wayne who's like, you know what? Yes, I do this sometimes.
Right. I just love the tone of that movie. I think it hits a weird sweet spot for me. And then George of the Jungle, that's the top 10. So what a time.
What a time.
I was just thinking Alien Resurrection would come up, but it didn't crack the top 10 because nobody likes it.
Right. And this movie comes in at number 20 for the year.
Okay.
It's respectable.
Yeah, absolutely. For this kind of movie, I feel like for sure. No major awards other than Jennifer Love Hewitt winning favorite actress and newcomer, and Sarah Michelle Gellar winning favorite supporting actress at the Blockbuster Entertainment Awards.
Oh man,
what
I
a sign
those.
of the times. Yeah.
The world is poorer without them.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's worth noting, too, that Duncan absolutely despises this movie, the author of the original book.
Well,
she particularly hated the slasher element because actually her daughter was murdered in the 1980s.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. And which she wrote a whole book about called Who Killed My Daughter? This is the crazy part, too, is that she thought it was actually the result of gang activity. But ironically, in 2021, it turned out it was a serial killer who walked into a local police station and confessed to killing her and 2 other women. So you can understand why she may have had a problem with the way this adaptation went.
Yeah, fair enough. Holy shit.
That's horrible.
That's insane.
Yep, for sure. So that's pretty awful, but an important thing to keep in mind about like when we keep rebooting this franchise again and again, like what it might mean to the original author. So that's a little bit about the aftermath of this movie.
Okay, well, I think we should actually get into the meat and give our thoughts and feelings on this. So, Nate, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, sure. Mostly what I want to start with is just how much of the success of this movie is the hook, is the title of the movie that sets up the whole premise versus everything else. I mean, is that really what makes it tick and what made it so successful?
I think it's a big part of it. I think also it arrives at exactly the right moment when people are looking for another, like the next Scream. And especially since the marketing would have been tied to the guy who wrote Scream wrote this, you should probably come and see it if you want that thing that you love so much. And the sequel of Scream 2 is on its way and everybody knows it's coming. It wasn't a surprise. So it grabs people in a way that maybe wouldn't have happened with different circumstances. Like, it's a perfect storm. The confluence of pop culture, especially, again, the rise of the internet allows people to know about stuff way sooner, way faster. There is still enough pull of a movie. It'll be 8 months before the VHS tape comes out, so they don't want to wait. They want to see it. And this is a time when people know that movies are made to be seen in an audience situation. Scary movies especially. You want that thrill that you just got from Scream.
Yep.
So you come charging back, and it delivers what it promises, right? Like, it's not a disappointing film in the moment. I saw it with a packed house. I saw it at a preview screening on a Wednesday night, I think the week before it opened, at the Highland, the big screen in the Highland Theater, which would have held 500 or 600 people.
Wow.
And it played. People screamed, people laughed, they enjoyed all of it. Sarah Michelle Gellar got the most laughs, I think, because people knew she wasn't weak on some level. Like the dissonance, it was almost stunt casting because Buffy wasn't a hit by any means, but people knew about it.
Right.
So you could get away with the 10% or 20% of people in the room knowing, like, she could kill that guy easy. She could kick his ass. She's the Slayer.
Yeah.
But that made it fun for them. And then that sort of let everybody else in the audience know to relax and just enjoy what was going on, that it was going to be okay. Because there's that buy-in, that moment of trust that you need in a horror film, any kind of horror film, that tells you, I know what I'm doing, it's going to be fun, or I'm going to try to scare the hell out of you, or whatever it is when the movie declares itself. And here, it's just basically the way the accident plays out, which is really, it's not brutal or violent or anything, but it's logical. It plays out in a way that says, I'm not going to cheat. The movie is going to show you how this happens and tell you what, like, the inciting incident is set up beautifully and executed really well. And because it's gorgeous to look at, and much more so now, I think, than I gave it credit for at the time.
Yeah.
Just because everything else looked pretty good at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that opening scene, or not, I guess it's not the opening scene, but the inciting incident, as you said, is so relatable when you're that age. Because you hear about it in school all the time. People are warning you about drunk driving and about accidents. And like, I know people, right? I know people who died in high school from, car accidents. And so it feels like something that could happen and puts you in the shoes of like, what would you do? Right? Yeah. Would you do the right thing? Would you call the police? Would you stay and admit to what you did? Or would you try to hide it? Or would you even just have that moment where you'd think, maybe I could get away with it, right? And I think that is such a compelling hook for the movie that goes a little bit beyond just the title, but it's such a great premise and makes sense as a YA novel too.
Yeah, I think that's why the book is so enduring.
Right.
Because it is, I mean, of all of Duncan's young adult novels, it's the one that is sort of grappling with the adult idea of guilt and grief in a way that the others don't. And I'm not going to go so far as to say it's an exploration of trauma, but it is kind of mature reading for kids who don't understand consequence.
Yeah.
Right? Like if the characters are a little older than the reader is probably, and they're grappling with the idea that they've actually done something that can't be fixed. And you're right, haunting is exactly the mode that takes in the book, and it doesn't really come across in the movie as well, because the movie is way more in the tradition of a Halloween or a Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street even. Like, they are all just slashers.
Right.
And in their own different ways. But what it does for me, the reason I like it so much is because it reaches back to Halloween specifically for the sense of visual style that doesn't appear in most of the Halloween clones. I mean, the Friday the 13th movies are just visually so... I mean, they're shot on the cheap and shot really fast, and sometimes they don't care about the lighting. I mean, the Friday the 13th thing is John S. Cunningham, the director of the first one, and the producer of most of the subsequent ones, came out of softcore pornography. Like, he was shooting adult reels in the 70s.
That makes a lot of sense when you look at that first movie, honestly.
Yes, exactly. And what it carries forward and what it does for the template of the slasher movie that even Halloween hadn't done is that it sets up a schedule. Because in porn, apparently, what worked was scientifically every 13 minutes, there had to be either the start or end of a sex scene. And what Cunningham brought to Friday the 13th is, all right, we kill someone every 7 minutes, no matter what else is happening.
Right.
And so that template then inspires all the subsequent, because it even teaches you how to anticipate it with the score and all the things that Halloween didn't do. Because Halloween, yes, it's a slasher movie now, but at the time it was a nightmare. Like, it was terrifying. It was supposed to be, it's Jaws more than anything else. Like, it's about an engine that won't stop killing. But then Cunningham invents the formula unwittingly for everything that follows. And I Know What You Did Last Summer only has a few characters. It can't have as many murders. So it spreads it out more, which makes them lean back on Carpenter and suspense and creating a visual aesthetic of tension and distance and the camera sort of prowling around, which is way more sophisticated. Scream does it too, but in a different way, because Scream is always really tightly focused on people so that people can creep up around them and behind them. Gillespie goes for like a full widescreen experience, big open spaces. The murderer could be hiding anywhere. The threats are all over the place. And that plays into what you were saying about haunting, because you buy into the nervousness and paranoia and tension of the character rather than the situation. And the movie, like, that's a really sophisticated aesthetic. It's color-coded to make the tension play in certain ways. It's much smarter than I would say it needed to be for a slasher movie in 1997. And that's, I think, what makes it play.
Yeah, and I think the sort of Jaws influence on this is, of course, the town, and it is the fishing and all of that sort of stuff. But it is also the world building, right? Of just that emphasis on, like, we're going to create this whole town, and it has this whole way that it works. And I love the beach scene at Dawson's Beach where they're telling their urban legends, but like the shipwreck is something that Jim Gillespie like added. He was like, I want to have this set element on the beach. And it just makes it iconic. It's an absolutely beautiful scene. It's super unique. And again, the play of the colors, right? Of just those strong blues and then the orange cutting through. And there are shots where it's like coming through the shipwreck and you can't even quite figure out what's going on until the camera comes around. Like, there's just some elements like that that are above and beyond what this had to be. The transition between the beach and the crash scene. I think there's a sort of a sex scene happening on the beach and there's some like corny 90s music playing. And then it cuts to them on the road and the music is still playing, but it moves from being non-diegetic music to diegetic music on the radio. And, Ryan Phillippe's like, turn that shit off. And they turn it on to it's like some rock station.
Or what the hell is this crap?
That's like you're saying, that's pretty sophisticated. Like it's interesting formal stuff. For me, that whole sequence, basically from the beginning of this movie to the car crash, I wouldn't change a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it really sets everything up so beautifully.
Even just the opening shot, like the opening helicopter shot, announces this movie as being like, this is something different. Like, I love Scream, and I spent most of this time comparing this to Scream because I think you can't, especially with Kevin Williamson's involvement, you can't help but do that. But as much as I love Scream, I don't think Scream is a beautiful film. There's moments that work really, really well, and there are nice shots in it, but there's no flexing like that opening helicopter shot in Scream. Like,
no, it's a rougher picture, I mean, Scream
and intentionally
2 is
so,
one where they had the money and they actually made it prettier.
Yeah, right. Exactly. For me, unfortunately, the movie never like lives up to the visuals in that I think it, in a weird way to what we're sort of saying, it sounds like this movie would have been better if it hadn't been a slasher. The core premise is really interesting, and I also find the ending very compelling. It's everything in between that kind of doesn't work for me. Again, not to keep comparing it to Scream, but like one of the elements I love about Scream, and Norm, you alluded to this, is that Scream is a whodunit. And this movie pretends it's a whodunit.
But by the in that direction.
But by the end, it becomes, and I'm very proud of this, it becomes less of a whodunit and it's more of a whodat. Like, because at the end, that ultimately the big reveal of who the killer is, you're like, who? What? Like, this is not somebody we've spent any time with. And that is so unsatisfying when you've tried to build it up as, oh, the big reveal is going to be this satisfying moment, and it's not.
But I think that's the thing is, like, again, if you treated this as a ghost story, right? The ghost story is often about uncovering the original sin that's causing the haunting. And that's the conclusion they give us, but they set it up like a whodunit, where it's like, maybe it's one of the kids, we don't know. And then they quickly do away with that, and there's nothing in between that moment of like, who did it? And then the ending, there's just like all these sort of things dropped in, but it doesn't feel like the driving force of the story. They just gradually figure it out. So it doesn't totally come together in that way, but that's actually what it is. It's like, it turns out the kid that they thought they killed, right, was actually a teen just like them. He's a foil to those characters who also killed someone in a car accident. And that's the original sin. But like, it just doesn't totally read in the final product, but it's a good idea.
And what I'm really curious about is knowing that Williamson basically had this script sitting around in a drawer, and after Scream's success, they were like, hey, let's make this movie now. Like, what was the original screenplay like? One has to assume that the success of Scream not only gets this movie made, but that the studio then says, okay, you got to make it more of a slasher movie. You've got to make it more in line with what is working or what was just super successful. But was the original script closer to the novel, and was it less of a slasher movie? Was it more? I have no idea. There's no necessarily any evidence of that, but knowing that he couldn't get it made, maybe.
Certainly the way this was shot even was less as a slasher movie. And then after test screenings, they added in a lot more of the slasher elements. Like almost any moment of gore was added in after test screenings. The killing of Johnny Galecki?
Johnny Galecki, yeah.
Like
Max.
that was added in afterwards because exactly, Norm, what you were saying. Like they were just like, it takes too long before anyone dies. You need to get an actual kill in there at some point. Which, again, one of the things that's interesting to think about is if that scene's not there, the whodunit lives longer. because you would think that character Max might be the killer for like more than half the movie before he shows up in the trunk of the main character's car, right? And it's an interesting trade-off where it's like maybe story-wise that might have actually worked better, but it would have been less of a slasher film.
But again, and I take issue with it because it also just makes no sense. Like, why is he killing this random kid who's totally unrelated? Like, that,
he was there on the night. I think that's the only thing I could think of.
I guess. It's just, this is my problem with this movie is that it's like, it looks great, but the structure of it doesn't work for me. It's funny. The first time I revisited this, because I had seen it many, many years ago, and then I rewatched it on my commute to and from work one time. And I looked at my review, and I was pretty complimentary, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when I watched it again this summer for the show, and I was like trying to watch it in one sitting, and I was like, this is a slog. Like, I just found it such a challenge. I was just bored for most of the movie. And I was like, weirdly, splitting it up over 2 sittings made me enjoy it more than I did when I had to like take it all in at once, which is the opposite of how it normally works. But I don't know, like, I'm hearing what you guys say and I appreciate all that, but I don't know that I agree. Like, it really didn't do anything for me.
Interesting. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about this cast? Because I think that might be where part of your challenges with this movie might be. Fair. But Norm, I'm curious, like, what do you think of the cast of this?
I mean, it's what you would expect from the period, right? Like, it's a bunch of young, hot people who have made movies and television shows where they're cast to be young and hot. They've all turned out to be actors in other projects subsequently, but this is not a movie that asks that from them.
Right.
And, you know, if you're putting the whole thing on Jennifer Love Hewitt ultimately to be the hero, there's not a lot of texture that's required from her. And I think she's fine. I mean, I don't think there's a weak note. I think they're all kind of playing at the same level, but I don't think anybody is pushing any of them to do stuff. They've all done better work elsewhere. Jennifer Love Hewitt is much more appealing in a comedy than she is in a horror movie, because when all she can do is scream, that just it reduces her options. Like something like Heartbreakers, where she's kind of jousting with her co-stars, that's more fun for her and for the audience. And same for Freddie Prinze Jr., who, you know, he was doing stuff like She's All That and Down with You, Down to You, all the generic Miramax stuff that he was churning out. That's where he seemed more comfortable. Yeah. And nobody sticks out as being bad. There is some like dissonance in watching Sarah Michelle Gellar play a victim instead of a hero, but they would do that again 2 months later in Scream 2. And once again, I saw that with a crowd that was just like, but she could put that guy through the wall. Why is this happening? I don't want to watch Buffy die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I would argue
that's like all stuff that exists outside the frame.
Right. I would argue that Philippe is horrible in this movie. Like, I think he's genuinely giving a terrible performance. I think he's not.
I just don't think he learned his instrument at that point. Right? Like
Valid.
he's
I'm not saying he's a bad actor,
like Cruel
but I
Intentions.
just. Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's, and maybe again it comes down to not getting the direction of like dial it back, dude. He feels like he's in a completely different movie. I think Anne Heche is arguably giving the best performance in the film.
I think undoubtedly, actually. Personally, it's like she's definitely the standout.
Well, she's the best actor in the picture, full stop.
Yeah. Well, exactly. She sort of feels like an outlier of like, why do you have this actual like real actor in this movie?
Yeah, but you need someone in that role giving that level of performance, because she doesn't kill anyone. She has to project this feeling of danger through her performance. And I think that she totally delivers on that.
It's so funny, though. I always remember that role as being played by Michelle Williams, and I don't know if it's like the Dawson's Creek thing.
Right, it's the 90s teen actress.
But in my mind, I'm like, she should be in this movie, and that is the role she would play. And maybe I'm also getting it confused with, like, because she's in Halloween H2O, I'm pretty sure. So I guess I'm just, like, conflating all of my, like, late 90s reactionary Scream movies, but... Yeah, for whatever reason, I always think, oh yeah, Michelle Williams plays the, like, and no, it's Anne Heche, and her performance is genuinely excellent. And to your point, Norm, I think Jennifer Love Hewitt is good in this. I think she's just maybe not super well written. It's crazy that the guy who wrote Sidney Prescott wrote her. Like, what happened there?
It's less that Hewitt isn't talented or able to carry a picture. It's more like there is no one in this film that's defined in more than 2 dimensions, if they're lucky. And yeah, this is absolutely not a character as rich as anybody in Scream, but that's because Scream is a comedy and this just isn't, right? Like Scream is going for laughs, and with laughs you need texture and character, especially if you're balancing horror. There's got to be backstory. Everybody forgets, like, Scream is 2 hours long. It was shockingly long at the time for a slasher movie, because usually these things are like 90 minutes at best. I think Last Summer is a little bit longer than that, but it uses all that time for character development, and there just isn't room for that in a movie like this. So everybody is like reduced to screaming teenager or fighty teenager or scared teenager. Scene to scene, like, characters are completely rewritten almost because they don't exist in the first place.
Totally. Yeah, there's like a couple moments in this where you're like, oh, I just saw like a flash of something interesting, but it's not carried through the script. Like Jennifer Love Hewitt, like I think in that beach scene, she starts talking in this very Kevin Williamson sort of way about like psychology, and you kind of get a hint of like maybe where she's going in college, and it's very erudite, and then they just completely drop that. And similarly, you have like Sarah Michelle Gellar when they're going to Missy's house. She starts making some movie references, right? I think she's referencing Silence of the Lambs. Again, very Kevin Williamson, but it's like, it's not really part of her character that she's like a horror fan or something like that. It's just this one throwaway moment. So
that feels like a last minute punch up on Williamson's part after Scream happened. And Columbia's like, can you make it more like the thing you did that made so much money?
Sure. Yeah, a million percent. I think the other thing that and you hit the nail on the head when you noted this, Norm, is like, this is a movie entirely without humor. It is so humorless, and I don't want to say it's self-serious necessarily. Like, it's not Robert Pattinson in The Batman, but I know it's unfair to keep comparing it to Scream, but I just can't help it. That's the magic alchemy of that movie, is the way that they balance the humor and the scares. We've talked about this a bunch on our show because Nate and my high school film teacher drilled this into our head about thrillers are all about like ratcheting up tension, but also releasing the tension. You have to have that release or else it just snaps and then you don't feel anything anymore. And this movie doesn't have any of those moments to really sort of like lighten the mood, to break that tension. It's all just sort of like a slowly simmering pot that then eventually just boils over in the sort of final climactic fight sequence. Even movies like Psycho, like, they have a little bit of that humor because you need that to gel everything. And this not having that, and I think just relying on, if we put enough pretty people in it, it's gonna work. I mean, the only humorous moment is the woman yelling at the cloud, and I don't think that is intentional. I don't think it's being played for laughs.
No. I think that what it's going for is a spooky mood. One of the things I was thinking about rewatching it for this was, this is a very cozy movie for me, right? Like, the vibe that it creates is just this it is very slow and simmering, very big on world building and visuals, but it's something I kind of like to live in a little bit. It actually reminds me, I've been talking about this a lot on the podcast recently, but of those Roger Corman Poe movies. But just in terms of like, those aren't really meant to be humorous, and they also aren't big on shocking thrills and that kind of thing. It's just this like spooky mood that eventually reaches a climax and then kind of finishes, right? Again, it would do better almost to like lean more into that of just like, let's just make this spooky and kind of scary and maybe a little bit less on the thrills. But yeah, it's an awkward in between.
It reminded me a lot of Carpenter's The Fog, which is not a movie that I know very well. I've only seen it once, and but like that, I was very much getting vibes of that movie, which that to me is more of a vibe movie than it is a scary movie, and especially too just like the visual language of being in like a seaside town and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Winding roads, creepy clouds, general sense of tension, fisherman imagery. It's. Yeah, I think they're leaning pretty heavily on The Fog as well, because, I mean, how can you not think about that if you're making this movie and you're also just creating the visual palette inspired by Halloween? You go to Carpenter.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But it's like, it is interesting. It's like, that's not a slasher movie. It's a horror.
It does have a series of deaths in a sequence.
It does have a series of deaths, but ends up being like a ghost story, which, with an original sin.
The Fog is great. And yeah, seriously undervalued in Carpenter's filmography.
100%. Is there anything more we want to say? I mean, we've been talking about the visual language because I think you just can't help it. But Is there anything more we want to say?
It's the most interesting thing about the film, right? Like, it really is. It's more so than dialogue and more so than performance. It's the sense of being steered by somebody. Like, that's the Hitchcock thing, right? He would take the camera and make you understand that he was holding it. Mm-hmm. And Gillespie doesn't quite go there, but he's working in the same general playground. That's as close as the movie comes to being self-aware. Like, it knows you've seen movies like this before.
Yeah, it's interesting that listening to the commentary, again, was really insightful in terms of Gillespie's frame of mind and why he did things certain ways. And he talks about, like, the bedroom scene, it mostly plays out in a oneer because they had lost so much time shooting another day that he's like, we basically have to make up 6 pages in one night. Well, so the only way I can do that
so
is
many scenes.
Yeah.
So many scenes like actually play out in one shot, like or with just like a couple cut-ins here and there, but there's a lot of masters.
But he says
that's panning back and forth.
It's because he lost so much time and he's like, this is the only way I can do it is if I do it basically as an extended oneer. And so when you know that, you're like, okay, that's interesting because it never feels like it's not intentional, which I have to give him credit for. Like, he does make those scenes, they don't feel lifeless or they don't feel like they ran out of time and money and they had to just do it all in one setup. But at the same time, I guess, again, what I'm bumping up against is that it does also feel like there's a lack of care in terms of the visual language sometimes. Like the scene where they do the POV shot in the bedroom and then it's revealed it's the sister. It's like, well, why are we doing that? That doesn't make sense within the visual language here. You're just kind of trying to screw with the audience. Like, it doesn't feel like... I don't know. There's moments like...
never do that.
No, but I feel like there are movies where they do that intentionally. And again, you think about something like Halloween. The POV shot is used intentionally. Black Christmas, the POV shot is used intentionally. And here it's just like, well, we're doing this just to with you.
Yeah, but, I think this is a classic example of the movie already lost you before that.
1,000,000%.
You're just paying attention at that point, and that's why you pick up on it.
100%.
It just feels playful in that moment because it's like, you know what? We're not actually going to do anything in this scene, but here's a way to make it interesting.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not going to have another kill, how do you add a thrill to that moment? Yeah, good point.
Well, so I guess my question here, and there's a reason I bring this up specifically, is what does this movie look like if Wes Craven makes it? I mean, yes, it becomes even more of a Scream riff, probably. Although maybe Wes would resist the temptation and would try and take it further in a different direction. I don't know. But the reason I bring this up is because this movie has that sequence where she's in the police car and then there's the killer. And then Williamson literally does this scene again in Scream 2, and it's so much more effective. So it's like the same writer basically writes the same scene twice, and in the hands of Wes Craven, that scene is genuinely terrifying, and here it just feels kind of like lifeless.
I think part of it is that Williamson had been writing a version of that scene forever and finally got a chance to do it the way he wanted to. Like, Scream 2 basically is made at a point where they had the trust of their producers to do whatever they wanted after the first one. And if you want to extend that, the scene where she's stepping over Ghostface over and over again, that's excruciating in a theater.
It's so good.
It was great. You could feel the audience like just clenching in their chairs. But you get the sense that it didn't maybe work on the page or something, because there's no way they could have adjusted it after they saw the audience reaction to Last Summer. But absolutely, Williamson might have seen how it was shot in Last Summer and wanted to push it harder in Scream 2. I think if Wes Craven makes this movie, nobody likes to talk about all the disappointing Wes Craven movies, but he made a lot of bad movies.
No, he did.
He was so well liked and so beloved that every time you would go back and hope, well, this isn't going to be Deadly Friend or Shocker or Deadly Blessing or The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, where the dog has the flashback. He made a lot of really bad movies. And I think if he'd made this one without Scream being around, because there's no, he wouldn't have been interested otherwise. If he gets this offered to him after Scream, he's just not going to do it. He's going to focus on Scream 2. And before that, if he makes it, it's exactly what it is now. Maybe it might not look as good because he was never that much of a visual stylist, not that interested in them. I think it would have just been another mediocre Wes Craven picture from that period where he was doing stuff like Shocker and Deadly Friend and
Cursed. Did you ever see Cursed, Nate?
I did see. I have not.
Cursed is bad.
I have not seen the director's version, which is apparently a lot smarter. They cut it to shit.
Yeah.
I like 3 or 4 things about it. I love the economy of it. I love the way that, at least the cut that I've seen, introduces these characters as soon as they get attacked. There's it's an American Werewolf logic. You don't need the backstory.
Yeah.
And it's fleet and it's funny, and Judy Greer's in it, which automatically makes it better than most of the other movies I saw
That's
that
true.
year.
Yep.
But no, it is not good. It is him absolutely wrestling with the material that just doesn't want to be funny.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies. It's like, it's like The Phantom Menace, right? John Harkness had this great line at the time where he said, like, imagine in 1998 if I told you there's a movie with Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Samuel L. Jackson, like just all these incredibly talented, gifted actors that were doing the best work of their careers around this time. Imagine if I told you there was a movie like this and it was really expensive and nobody's interested in it.
Right.
And Cursed is like Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg. Jesse Eisenberg is in it.
Yeah.
And
a babyface Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah. I mean, what was this, like his 3rd movie after Roger Dodger?
So.
And because he's Wes Craven and everybody loves him and wants to work with him, he has access to this incredible range of talent, and this is the result.
Yeah. I mean, what
just sad.
If it were me, I would say more John Carpenter than Wes Craven. I would love to see the John Carpenter version, which would probably be weirder. It probably would have a supernatural element to it. I don't know if he could resist doing that. The other thing, though, is like, I'm not sure if he would be as interested in the teen heartthrob part of it or not.
The Carpenter movie I think of the most when I watch I Know What You Did Last Summer is Christine, where it's it's like slick and shiny and
sure.
The product of the car is part of the element of it. And Gillespie does that with the town here, where there is texture and atmosphere everywhere. I don't know. Carpenter in the 90s probably just wouldn't have been that interested in it.
Yeah.
Like this would have been what, like Ghost of Mars era? Like
no, Vampires.
The
most immediate one, right? Like that was 95. And he was just, at that point too, like the weed had sort of consumed him.
Yeah.
At that point, he was like just, and again, this is not a negative. John Carpenter is apparently very good at doing the things he likes to do while massively high. And maybe he's quit since. I don't know how things have gotten as he's aged. But he was not only unapologetic, but really enthusiastic about it. By the mid-90s, he was just happy hanging out with his friends and
totally
smoking joints constantly and making the occasional bit of art. And
then he discovered video games, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and easy money. God knows.
Yeah.
But his career had already sort of started edging into that place where I think Mouth of Madness is the Mouth of Madness. That's right. In the Mouth of Madness. I'm always confusing it with the Lovecraft title because that's the whole point of that film.
Right.
Speaking of self-referential horror, In the Mouth of Madness is the one where he has the most fun and then just sort of stops trying, let's say, to develop new projects and takes whatever lets him work with his friends and get home by 6 o'clock. So I think Last Summer might have appealed really for that because it wouldn't have been hard. But at the same time, he's done that. And the movie we got knows that he did it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think Gillespie is a decent filmmaker and has made a decent film. And again, I found more respect for him listening to the commentary and understanding his process. And at the end of the day, I think it makes sense that this movie isn't made by a Wes Craven or by a John Carpenter or a Brian De Palma, like any of those big guys at the time, because it really isn't trying to do that. It's cashing in on a craze and saying, can we ride those coattails by paying the guy who wrote that thing to, dust off this script that has been floating around for years and make us a quick buck. So it makes sense that it is not being made by like a big name, but one cannot help but wonder, like, is there a better movie
here? Yeah,
is there a better movie here if it's made by I don't want to say a better filmmaker, but a more experienced filmmaker?
Well, the masters, right? I mean, like who we're talking about are like some people who have made some of the best horror movies, period, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and also some of the worst, let's be clear.
Sure.
Like, that's the ultimate irony of all these guys, is that they oscillate from making masterpieces to utter schlock. I mean, I always think about Tobe Hooper and like Texas Chainsaw 1 versus Texas Chainsaw 2. I mean, they could not be more, and intentionally so, they couldn't be more different. But just like, you're like, this is made by the same person? Like, are you kidding me? It's wild to think about.
You mentioned De Palma, and I think there are things in this movie that strive for his level of polish. Mm-hmm. And he might have actually found ways to make it fun. Like the same way femme fatale just has all that giallo silliness.
Yeah, definitely.
Is just there to entertain him, not even necessarily the audience. I mean, it's just there for him to look what I can do, mirrors and windows and stalking, and somebody with a sense of humor about what the camera can do in that situation.
Yeah.
With the first person slashers, that could be really fun.
Well, and I think, and this is probably a good segue, I think he would have handled the mystery and the killer element better than this film does currently. Obviously, again, being a student of Hitchcock, ultimately that is what he's best at,
if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Homage, French for stolen. I think he could have maybe handled that element more effectively than Gillespie is able to. So that's why I do want to sort of talk about this whole idea of the killer and the mystery element.
Right. I was tracking the second time I watched it, like, who does the movie want us to think is the killer at what points in time, in what order? And so this is sort of what I came up with, which is like, so there's David Egan, right? The kid who they think they've killed is the first person that they sort of introduce as like, maybe he didn't die. Maybe he's still alive and he's stalking us. Then you get Max and Barry, right? Yeah. So Ryan Phillippe and Johnny Galecki, both potentially being sort of candidates because Barry's like, got a big temper. Yeah, Max is kind of a creep. But then they diffuse that very quickly with the fight and then the added scene where Max is then murdered by the fisherman, right?
Right.
And then after that, it gets a little amorphous where you're like, I don't know, maybe it was David Egan, maybe it could be someone else, who knows? Until you get to Missy Egan, who is just like the threatening relative of the kid.
The walking red herring, basically.
Right. And then finally you have Ray, Freddie Prinze Jr., Billy Blue, right, who Missy Egan mentions as being a friend of David Egan. Turns out that is in fact Ray, but you think that might mean he's the killer for a little while. And then finally we meet a brand new character, Ben Willis, the fisherman.
Well, and not only that, they really, like, to your point, Nate, like, that little while that you think it might be Freddie Prinze Jr. is all of, 30 seconds before they then reveal, no, it's this random fisherman character.
Well, it is interesting on rewatch. There are moments earlier where you can tell that he's acting suspicious.
Right. Oh, fair
Where
enough.
they
Fair
kind
enough.
of say something and he kind of deflects, or he changes the subject and that kind of thing. It's interesting that it's subtly laid in there. But yeah, they don't ever kind of say, oh, maybe, I think Barry maybe at one point is like, maybe it was you have a slicker, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not really presented as a serious option until the very end. But by that point, I think, I'm not sure if the audience believes that it's going to be Ray in that moment or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that suspicion only works if you've seen Scream, right?
Well,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the question is is there a way to make this reveal satisfying? Because how do you introduce that character earlier without it being honkingly obvious that he's the killer? But you kind of need to in order for that twist or that payoff to work.
You don't make it a whodunit. I think that's the answer.
Yeah, I guess that is the answer.
Is you make it a mystery, but it's not about the characters and which one of them is killing people.
Right.
You make it more of a detective story of getting to the bottom of it before time runs out. That's the tension, is we're all gonna get killed and we need to figure out why we're being killed, but it's not the cast of characters as the focus.
Yeah.
You treat it like a curse.
Right. Yeah, exactly. A curse story. Yeah. I think that would be the preferred thing for me.
Well, and they do sort of set everything up with this urban legend, which kind of doesn't really it's like this misguided setups with no payoffs. They set up the urban legend of the fisherman. So that could have been what they did, is just more that it's this character that's always existed. And it's not, like you said, it's not a whodunit as much as it is just this ongoing thing. We have to stop it before it happens to us, not we have to figure out who it is before it happens to us, kind of thing. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's kind of a mess, but
well, I think what you're seeing is just Williamson stapling on as much stuff as he can to pad out the original novel, because there's not much to it, right? And especially since it can't do the thing the book did, which is sit in their heads and not kill anybody.
Right.
It's just the audience is here to see something else.
Right. You need set pieces at the very least of some kind. And, it's hard to think of what they would be if it's not a slasher and you don't want to make it supernatural. then what do you do? Right?
Well,
so you have to do something.
The thing that is interesting, though, because again in the commentary, Gillespie says he had never heard of this book before because he grew up in Scotland. But he said the entire cast was like, "Oh yeah, I read this in middle school or whatever." And Norm, you said that you read it as well. So like, are people obviously? I'm sure they see the trailer and they're like, "Okay, it's a slasher movie." But I have to imagine if you've read the book, you're not assuming you're going to get a slasher movie. So is there a world where they could have just made the book and not made it a slasher? Like, that's
probably, but it's a TV movie. Like, it's just not a horror film at all.
But when you're
it's a YA thing, like which is where those TV movies lives. Yeah, exactly.
When you're going into this, Norm, knowing the book and knowing from the trailers and from the people who brought you Scream, like, are you going, wait, how's that going to work? Like, this is that book wasn't a slasher movie, like.
Well, no, but I guess at that point, I'm aware of who Williamson is and what Scream was, and so I just assume that's where they're going to take it, which is exactly what they did. It's if you see the trailer, tells it all for you. Like, it tells you what kind of mood it's going to be. That the hook, and adding the hook is, again, it's Williamson's idea to bring that into it, to stitch in an existing urban legend and then create the urban legend of the fisherman within the movie. Mm-hmm. And it's really clever because it tells you everything you need to know. If it's an urban legend, anything can happen. Yeah. And if it's a guy with a hook, that's pretty simple too. Like, he's not just going to threaten and chase people. Somebody's going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine that, the people who have read the book are not the target demo.
Wow, that's maybe true. Yeah.
Because it's a book from the 70s. So it's really more people of our generation, Adam, who are a little bit older than us, that are probably the people that they're aiming for, like my brother. But my brother probably never read the book.
But it's like an early sign of IP too, right? Like, it's the idea that you can just take up an existing property and staple this other thing onto it.
Totally.
Or move it into this genre, and everybody kind of gets it. I mean, basically, as soon as it's rated R, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, the way to see this evolve around the time when Nate and I are of age to see these movies. When we're in high school, we get the Platinum Dooms era of let's remake all of these classic horror movies from the 70s, but just make them horrifically violent. But I remember seeing like Amityville Horror and loving that movie because it was like, it was trying to be, well, at the time, and I hadn't seen anything else, but I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, this is more than just a haunted house movie. They're trying to do something more with this. Whether or not they actually succeed in rewatching it now, I'm less sold on it. But
no, it's terrible. But what you're right though. If you have no frame of reference, it's something new and vivid, and certainly part of a wave that's going on in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And this is doing the same thing. It's like, if you have no frame of reference and it's part of the wave of we're riding the coattails of Scream, then it all it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, too, the other interesting thing is, like, now when we do these things, they're all steeped in nostalgia, right? Mm-hmm. So you're remaking the thing because someone remembers it, like, and it's on that, like, 20-year cycle of, like, when you were a kid, this thing was a thing, and now as an adult, you're going to love it because we're going to reference that old thing. Right. The interesting thing about, like, the 90s and 2000s is, like, that was not the game for most of this stuff, with the exception of maybe the Star Wars prequels, but a lot more of it was just like, there's all this IP out there that is like not being used for stuff. What could we recycle in a way that like we don't give a shit about the source material? And sometimes that's really successful, like Mission Impossible, for example, where it's like they're just assuming no one who's watching that movie gives a shit about the original, right?
I mean, there were a handful of people who didn't like the recasting. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And it's like, sometimes there were definitely people who were annoyed by the way these things were treated, but this seems more like that, where it's just like, this is a book that like no one's adapted, and so it's something fresh and new that people haven't seen before, but they don't care about who read the book, at all. And that seems to be kind of the MO of adaptations and remakes and that kind of thing of this era.
Yeah, I want to talk. Fealty isn't on anybody's mind.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, for sure. I do think we should talk a little bit about the ending before we wrap up, because it's the Simpsons, everything wrapped up in a neat little package.
Yeah.
And of course, again, honkingly, we're going to make a sequel ending, which, the confidence, the sheer level of confidence there.
Well, shot after test screenings as well, I believe. They probably knew that they had something and didn't want to foreclose on they only find the hook in the water as well. So there was already like a question mark ending, but the end. But then they added another question mark ending just to make sure that it's not Oprah.
Well, and I
That's
remember
actually the most Wes Craven thing about all of it, because he ended almost all of his movies with this sort of really kind of thing. And it's charming. It's what you expect from a movie like this.
It also it works because when I saw this movie for the first time in university, I downloaded it on our inter-university peer-to-peer network and I watched it, and that ending comes up and I'm like, oh, well, I want to see how this plays out. And so I downloaded the second movie, saw how they sort of recap that, but then change it. And then very quickly it falls apart completely. And I remember nothing else of the movie. But I just was like, what are they going to do with this? How does this play out? And it was very unsatisfying, as is often the case with these cash-in sequels. But it's a compelling ending. It does make you go, oh, I want to see where they're going with this.
And they went nowhere.
They went absolutely nowhere. Yes, exactly.
I mean, I will say the sort of action or whatever kill sequence in the department store with Sarah Michelle Gellar, I think is a more satisfying scene than the boat for me. I think it's a much more like compelling set of set pieces, right? Everything from like, walking through the quiet department store, escaping up the elevator, jumping out the window. There's the cop car, there's the alleyway, and then like just almost getting away and then not, like getting to the parade. Like all of that stuff I think is so great. And then the boat sequence I find kind of forgettable, honestly.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree.
Yeah.
I think they basically just got married to the idea of, well, he's a fisherman.
Right.
And
right.
then, it has to end in the water. It has to end at the dock.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, totally. And also, like, I've already kind of forgotten what the connection is between the killer and the, it gets very convoluted. It's like the father of the girl who was dating the kid that they thought they killed, but in fact, he committed suicide or something, and they actually ran over the fisherman who is now hunting them down. And then, of course, as it turns out, they didn't actually kill anyone.
Yeah.
Which is you might say it lets them off the hook a little too easily.
There we go. Well done.
But I do kind of wonder if it undercuts the point of the story about guilt and haunting and all of that. Like, is it just too easy for them to say, like, oh, actually, we didn't kill anyone after all. I guess we don't have to be guilty anymore.
Well, I mean, it lets you root for them to kill him.
True.
In a way that otherwise might have been more complicated.
Yeah.
Because you could then joke, well, they finished the job. After all, that's what they were trying to do. But if they're innocent, ultimately, and the only thing they did was be really negligent after, there's a joke in the remake. It's like, all we did was leave the scene of the accident. It's like, technically, yes. But the best technically correct.
Well, they did also like throw the body in the water, realize he was still alive, and then still let him die again.
Right. Well, that's what they do in this one.
Yeah.
And the latest sequel kind of also. But it really is like, yeah, you're off the hook for doing a shitty thing. But also, if you didn't kill him, then the morality of the whole thing just becomes a simple slasher movie, right? Where they are innocent, and the persecution of the innocent is one of the things that people like from slasher movies.
Yeah.
So it's organic. Like, that's the thing about this movie. It's not particularly well written, but the structure is such that you can see how they talk themselves into every decision.
Right.
100%.
For good or ill, it's like, oh, well, this is obviously the answer to that.
Totally. They made a pretzel at the end instead of like a loaf of bread.
Yeah. And pretzels can be very satisfying.
I love pretzels, so,
Well, on that note, do we want to jump into our Simpsons speed round quickly, Nate?
Let's do it. It's a speed round.
So, Norm, feel free to jump in at any point here if you have an answer, or just pass because we completely blindsided you here. But number one, are there any moments in this movie that feel like Simpson jokes but aren't? Nate?
The original one? Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
Retroactively, maybe, because The Simpsons did do the parody.
Right.
But then you're in that Citizen Kane zone where it's like, am I laughing at this because it's a joke or because it became a joke?
Right, exactly. Totally. I mean, I was thinking about just the cops finding the fisherman's hand, still holding the hook and being like, yeah, he's probably dead. That feels like a Simpsonism.
I said the what are you waiting for shot, when I saw it and immediately came to mind was the, okay, Bob, this time it's personal moment in the whatever Sideshow Bob story that it is. And then Bart's, wonderful line of, he did try to kill me.
Yeah, Sideshow Bob Roberts.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah. We did cover that one. Okay, did you learn anything about The Simpsons from this movie? No. No.
Not from this one.
Does this movie still have any juice for more Simpsons parodies?
I wonder if they'll respond to the sequel, to the preposterousness of doing this again. And that could be a fun Treehouse of Horror segment.
What if they did a legasequel of this Treehouse of Horror episode?
That
would be funny.
That would be good. Yes, exactly. That I like.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's actually a lot that you could dig into beyond just doing a front-to-back parody. I think there are little memes in this movie that you could kind of pull from and riff on in an interesting way.
Well, the one thing I would say is also, like, even just the original premise of the novel, this idea of, like, kids doing something and sitting with the guilt, like, that is something The Simpsons does, I would say, better than anybody. And we've talked about the episode where Bart steals being, I don't like to watch it because I find it utterly heartbreaking to watch. Like, they understand that better than I think anybody else. So I think there's a world where they could take the initial premise and not necessarily do it as a slasher, but actually do it as a very serious episode in that sort of James L. Brooks way that deals with real life consequences.
Or you could do a funny way, but just the kids making a pact to hide something they did wrong is like a great setup for an episode. Totally.
For sure. Well, I mean, there's the episode where Bart kills the bird. Like, that's kind of playing in that space. Are there, well, I know the answer to this. Are there any other movies by this director or in this franchise that The Simpsons should parody?
I mean, Detox could be fun. Detox could be fun. I mean, just putting all the Simpsons characters you expect would be entertaining, bouncing off each other in a place where they're not allowed to leave. I'm picturing like Moe's Tavern lockdown situation.
Right.
Yeah, like Homer, Barney, Ned, Moe,
Reverend Lovejoy.
Wiggum, Reverend Lovejoy. Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely do a bottle episode. That's basically what Detox is. And if they're trying to figure out, who the killer is among them, then that could also be very fun, although it's only ever going to be Reverend Lovejoy.
Right. Fair enough.
Yes.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end where we ask the very simple question, Norm, would you recommend this movie? Do the strengths outweigh the weaknesses?
I don't honestly know anymore. I think they used to. In the olden days when this was the kind of cut above the usual slasher stuff that you were seeing, simply because it was made by a studio with recognizable actors as opposed to an indie production with a bunch of strangers. I don't know. It scratched an itch once. And 30 years later, I think the joke of the new movie is that, this thing happened and some people died, but it was really kind of a forgettable thing that happened in the first place.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I inevitably recommend it to people because they'll see my name on the box and I laugh.
Sure.
But it is like I have this bizarre relationship with this film that I was about to say that nobody else has. But yeah, in this case, but there are like everybody who's pull quoted on everything presumably has the same sort of weird fondness for the thing that they kind of liked a little and then somehow got stapled onto for the rest of their lives. Or at least the rest of their careers. I don't know. I would recommend it to people to see what sort of movie looked like the ideal slasher film before Scream. Like as an example of what Scream ended and changed. In the same way I'd point to Logan's Run, or something like Black Sunday, which was released months before Star Wars. And that was what people thought a blockbuster looked like. And then suddenly it looks like an antique.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would recommend it as a historical reference, but as an entertainment, I think it would be a stretch.
Yeah. Nate?
I think I would recommend this, and it's mostly just because it just has a mood. It has a vibe. Around Halloween, of course, we always have our spooky season of just watching a whole bunch of horror movies, but my wife's not big on like super gory or super scary stuff, and this movie is very gentle, but kind of hits that sweet spot of being kind of appropriate for spooky season. But yeah, I mostly love the world that it creates. Just sitting in that coziness of this like mystery that is kind of low stakes and everything, it hits a spot for me. So I would definitely recommend it. Adam, what about you?
Having a child who's still very much too young for this, he's only 4, but I reflect on this question differently as a result. I would be very curious to know what it's like to see this movie before Scream. Baby's first slasher movie, as it were. To introduce someone to the genre by way of something like this, you know, you could show this to like maybe a 12-year-old these days because it is relatively tame. Like the violence isn't over the top, the language isn't over the top. It's apparently not a PG-13, but you know, it certainly would be like 14A in Canada or whatever. So I think this is an interesting entry point, and then to see, okay, now that you've seen this thing, let's watch this movie that is essentially deconstructing and eviscerating in many ways this very thing, even though this technically came before and after, like
written by the same guy
and written by the same guy. Now you can see what this is sort of like reactionary to. So I would be curious how someone were to see it in the opposite order, what that effect would be.
So you're planning a social experiment is what you're saying.
Exactly. But at the same time, like, I don't think the movie's like, there are so many other things I would recommend beforehand. And again, especially if you've seen Scream, I don't know, you're not going to get much out of this. So
yeah, I mean, I would start with Halloween in that situation rather than this.
Wow, fair. You start with the masterpiece. But to that point, Norm, we always also like to ask about extra credit, or sort of thinking if you were doing like a double feature, what would be an interesting film to pair with this? Either, you know, it can be in the same vein or it can be something completely different. But what would you recommend people, either if they like this or maybe if they didn't like this but wanted to like this, you know, what could they watch instead?
I mean, the obvious one is Scream, right? Just because they are in such weird anti-synchronization with each other. Like, Scream is Kevin Williamson writing the movie he wants to write, and this is the movie that he writes for a studio that is paying him a lot of money.
Right.
But ultimately, he has to please them. I think I'd pick a Final Destination movie just to look at the group dynamic and the way things evolve or don't evolve. Like Final Destination 2. I mean, Final Destination 1 is obviously the direct comp because you've got the youth. Like, it's a group of school friends in both movies. But if you go with 2, you see how the idea of, because the Final Destination movies are serial killer films. It's just that death is the serial killer.
Yeah.
And they evolve into comedies so well over the course of 25 years that it's absolutely fascinating to watch Bloodlines, the new one, which I had a blast with. And realize that they're not even trying to be scary. It's just like, how can you torture someone in a comedy way and then just murder a whole bunch of people while you're at it? Like, those guys, they get it. They understand what these movies are for.
Yeah.
And that's why I refer to Last Summer as an old school movie, even though it really isn't, because it's exactly 20, you know, it's 20 years after Halloween, and it's 20 years before where we kind of ended up, where horror ended up before the Scream reboots. It's in the midpoint of, this was what passed for what people wanted to see, in that it's more sophisticated than a Friday the 13th movie, but it's also not as brutal as a Scream movie. And then Scream just comes along and reinvents everything anyway. But like the sequels, I mean, Scream 2 and 3, like, by building on what Williamson did, because Williamson in 2 just keeps on going and finding new rules and playing with new commentary and all the sequel stuff. And they're still sort of catching up to what he did then structurally with the new Screams. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of sits on its own in a weird little sad way, right? Like, it's become popular again because people won't stop remaking it, but it really did what it wanted to do the first time and doesn't need to be followed. So I guess, I would pair it with Scream or Halloween just to show you how a genuine artist will elevate the form, whether they're going for jokes or no jokes, or suspense or no suspense. Like, this is a movie that sits comfortably in the B space of all of those other films. So whichever other one the audience hasn't seen is the one that I would plug in.
Totally. Nate, what about you?
Love that you call that Final Destination 2. It's, I think, you know, I haven't seen a lot of the sequels, but I love the second one more than the first one. I think the second one's great. It's where they hit their stride.
I think so. And then some of the other ones aren't great either, but 5's not unclever.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of closes the book on it, and then they come up with this one, and it's just like, you know what? There's a bunch of other stuff you weren't aware of, and it's so many smashed faces.
It's so
that's
fun.
It is. That's what they
I've
want.
never. So I saw that movie and I've not seen any of the other ones.
Oh yeah,
they've been on my watch list forever. But we needed something to go see, and we saw it. I had such a blast that I was like, I can't wait for this October. I'm going to go back and rewatch all of them, recognizing that they're going to be very different from what I saw. But I was just like, if they're even half as fun as this movie, I'm going to have a blast. So I'm very
2
very
and 5
excited.
are pretty good. The others are sort of just there, and 3 has Mary Elizabeth Winstead, so that's good too.
I feel like the first one took the premise a little seriously. Right. And then by the second one, they very quickly got that there's comedy in this and they need to kind of lean into that a little more. Yeah. But it's a blast. Okay, so I originally had written down urban legend right? Because I just think it's fun. It is very much also like in the B space of this type of movie, but it's one of the ones that reminds me the most of this movie.
Right.
But when I was thinking about it, I was like, I am thinking of this as like a ghost story. What is the right ghost story? And I couldn't quite land on the right thing. Like I said, Roger Corman, it's not really like anything like those movies, but it's just that sort of like, it's a little bit slower than most slasher movies. It's a little bit more atmospheric and less interested in like the rule of killing. But the one that absolutely resonated is The Fog. That's the one.
Yeah.
I think go see The Fog. It has that same atmospheric vibe. It's the same kind of town. Even the visuals, like really, there's a lot of resonance between these two movies, I think. But it gets at it. I think it would draw out the ghostly sort of aspect of I Know What You Did Last Summer and maybe show a different direction for how you could think about it. Plus, I love that movie. I think that movie is a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah. That is a very Nate movie, I will say.
Yes. Yeah. Adam, what about you?
So, I mean, yeah, like, obviously, I adore Scream. Watching it for the first time, I taped it off of CTV, and so it was edited for TV, but my dad taped it for me and then told me I shouldn't watch it because it'd be too scary. And then I remember, like, whenever my parents would leave home, like, I would illicitly watch it because I thought I wasn't really supposed to. And so I would watch it piecemeal, and it just holds such a special place in my heart. I love that movie. And if you haven't seen it, I mean, like, again, it's just... These two movies are so intertwined that, like, that feels like a natural suggestion. But the movie I'm going to actively recommend, because I'm also assuming everyone's seen Scream, is Prom Night. The movie that, when I saw Prom Night, I was like, oh, like, everyone talks about Scream as riffing on Halloween and owes so much to Halloween, but I was like, it actually owes way more to Prom Night than it's given credit for. And then I rewatched Scream, a couple weeks later, doing my annual sort of rewatch, and they call out Prom Night a bunch. And I was like, oh, so like Kevin Williamson is actively saying, no, like I'm stealing from Halloween, yes, but I'm really stealing a lot from Prom Night. And it has the sort of like, who is the whole whodunit element comes from Prom Night. And Prom Night's not a particularly great movie, but it is a Canadian movie, and it does have Leslie Nielsen and Jamie Lee Curtis. And for that in and of itself, it's worth checking out. And Nate, I don't know if you remember, in our high school film class, we had a poster for Prom Night. That was like one of the movies. That's the only reason I remember it. And I remember it because the poster has like, it's a guy in like a balaclava with a knife sort of running down the middle of, but the eyes are like really far apart in a way that's super uncanny and doesn't make any sense. And I always would just stare at that poster and go, that's not physically possible. But anyway, it's really fun. It's really dumb. I think I watched it on Tubi when I watched it. Like that's where you're going to find it, is on something like Tubi. But it's a fun little romp. And again, you get to sort of see like a young Jamie Lee Curtis when she's just making these kind of movies before she has her resurgence in the 80s with like, I mean, I guess what is the movie that kind of restarts her career as a
Trading Places.
Yeah, Trading Places, I guess, would be the one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, it's a fun watch. So, well, on that note, that brings us to the end of the episode. Norm, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun, and I'm so glad we brought you on so we could hear all about how you ended up on the box, but also, all about your history. I knew we were going to get some great stories. Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
I mean, there's all the stuff that I do. I have a newsletter dedicated to physical media called Shiny Things, which you can find on the Ghost platform because they're cool and not in any way Nazis. And you can find it at shiny-things.ghost.io. And I write about new movies and catalog releases on Blu-ray and 4K. I've got a paid tier where I do recommendations for stuff that's not on disc yet. Every Friday, people get a little box of 3 or 4 recommendations for stuff. I reviewed the new I Know What You Did Last Summer in there, and when the disc comes out, invariably I'll probably review that too. Almost certainly will not be on the box for that one, but nobody's on the boxes anymore, so that's okay. And of course, there's the podcast, Someone Else's Movie, which is 560 odd episodes of people talking about movies that they love, that influenced them, or sometimes it's somebody who just saw something that they really got excited by for the first time in a long time and wanted to talk about that. It's endless hours of like hundreds of hours of audio. And I think I'm proudest of that more than anything else I've done. It's certainly the thing I like doing the most. And it's always this great weird tension of finding out what somebody wants to do and then me trying to figure out how it works and connects to their filmography. That's a really fun, strange challenge every week, but it's always fun. Seth Worley's episode on Men in Black, the director of Sketch, is one of those things where it's like, oh, I what an interesting choice. And then the minute he starts talking about it, it's like, yep, of course you made this.
Yeah.
You made this movie based on your love for this movie. But moments like that are the best.
I will say that was one of my entry points to before we got to know each other, Norm, was that podcast. And then, of course, your newsletter is great. I love it. I wouldn't recommend subscribing to it if you don't want to part with money, though, because the number of movies where I'm like, oh, I guess I'm buying that now.
In the large. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But no, that's okay. I'm
listeners can't see Norm's background, but he has probably thousands of DVDs and other physical media behind him right now. So a very informed voice on this matter,
yes,
I would imagine.
Exactly. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
He's doing the
pan. Oh yeah,
I'm
definitely thousands.
tremendously jealous.
You really need to see the tilt. Yeah.
I'm still trying to find my way into being able to get on the list where they send me stuff to review, because Lord knows the amount of money I am burning through on my upgrades and Blu-ray purchases is just it's a problem. Don't tell my wife. Anyway, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share this episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help cover the cost of making this show. I promise I'm not using it to buy 4Ks. Next time, it may be after Halloween, but we will be continuing our spooky season Simpsons style with the episode Thanksgiving of Horror and its parody of Alien, and we will be joined by the Emmy Award-winning writer of that episode, Dan Vebber. So we hope you'll join us in a couple weeks for that. But until then, Nate?
We'll see you around the play.
Is there anything else we want to unpack before we move on to the wrap-up here?
If you want to talk about the legasequel, the 2025 version, I can hit a couple of points on that.
Give us your type 5. I would love to hear it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's a little more complex. The director, Jennifer Caitlin Robinson, is someone who is, in this case, I think people thought it was another movie from an unknown, but she's actually really good at the things she does. She created an MTV show called Sweet Vicious and a movie called Do Revenge with Camila Mendes and Maya Hawke, which, if you haven't seen, is actually really clever in a fun kind of vaguely retro Mean Girls sort of way, but also with violence. And Camila Mendes was, in fact, supposed to star in I Know What You Did Last Summer, but then had to pull out for scheduling reasons, I think. And they got, I'm going to butcher her name, I think it's Chase Sui Wonders, not Chase Sui, but Chase Sui Wonders, who is currently on The Studio on Seth Rogen's show.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She plays the exhausted production executive. And she's great in that. And she's pretty good in this. And it really is just a simple, oh shit, not this again movie, set in the same place, 27 years later, with some of the same characters coming back, the surviving characters return. And mostly it's just about a new friend group who end up in a really bad situation after covering up a car accident. And it
keeps happening.
Well, yeah, it is smart enough to do that. It is smart enough to acknowledge that.
Okay, good.
People keep going out on Murder Cove, on Dead Man's Curve or something. There are just little nods. But the thing that got me on side, again, it's not good, but it knows what it is.
Right.
In a really smart way. It knows what you expect from it and what it is here to do. And it's better at the pacing. Like, it leans into the whodunit nature. There are actual suspects in this one. And there's a scene about 45, 50 minutes, like halfway through the picture, there is a scene that is Jaws 2. Like, they basically have a town hall meeting and everybody is doing the same things they did in Jaws 2, which is like, well, we're just getting back on our feet and tourists are coming and there's this development thing happening. We should really keep this quiet.
Right.
And there is this moment where it just cuts back to the kids who have this great incredulity of, this has happened before. How have you not learned from this?
Didn't you see the first movie?
Yeah. Well, and that's like, by that point, Ray, Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character, is back. He runs a bar where one of the kids works. And it's Sarah Pidgeon, who was in this terrific, she's an Australian actor. She was in an Amazon Prime series called The Wilds. It was kind of like Lost in a way that didn't work, but the acting was terrific. And it was something, these kids go to what they think is a wellness camp and learning center to learn about bonding. And it turns out they've just been enlisted in some psychiatrist's bizarre experiment to Lord of the Flies them, basically.
Wow.
To put them on a desert island or make them think they're on an island and have to strive for themselves. And Sarah Pidgeon played the lead, and she was great. And so I've been waiting for someone to figure out something to do with her. And so she shows up in this, and immediately I'm like, okay, you're smart. There's a reason to watch this character. I'm going to keep an eye on her. And she is working for Freddie Prinze's character, and he has this kind of broken, miserable veteran of the horror thing going on, which is fun. Again, he understands what his role is in this movie. He is there to be the color, to just sort of stand in the corner and not shave and say, well, 27 years ago, it's all happening again. But he's also given a reason to be there and a place in the story where when he shows up in this town hall sequence, it's genuinely funny and smart because it's like, well, I'm here to tell you, and you all know me. This is going to end badly. You remember what happened. I was there. And just, again, it's like he gets to be Brody, but he gets to be Brody without any authority, which makes it really fun. And then having characters in a movie like this, in a situation like this, acting the way people in a situation like this would act and try to not get killed and try to figure it out and understand that this has happened before and look into it. That's where Scream comes in. This movie has learned the lessons from Scream that the first sequel just absolutely did not. And while I am not arguing for this as in any way a good film, a classic of anything, it is attempting to do something richer and deeper. And just sometimes the effort is all that matters because it's more than you expected. Yeah. And yeah, it's not bad. And it's really well cast. It's got Jonah Hauer-King and Tyreek Withers and Klein, who've all just sort of popped in various television shows and are just really well used here. I mean, there's stuff that's missing. There's a thing about somebody's dead mom that we just don't get into at all, other than this character has a dead mom.
Right. Kind of like the original. There's
it's
dead
like,
dad, same
it's
thing.
just a nod. It's a way that, but it's delivered in a way, weirdly enough, that is, again, like the opening of the original I Know What You Did Last Summer. It just says, look, we know what we're doing. We understand what you think we're going to do, and we're going to do something slightly different. And you know what? Maybe if you sit through it, you'll enjoy it. And it's a bit longer than it needs to be, but it's aware of what it is trying to recapture as much as what it's trying to do. And it sort of acknowledges, this is a weird pull, but in much the same way as Trainspotting 2, it's like there is no way to make a satisfying sequel to this movie that you think you want.
Right.
So we're going to try to touch on some of the same ideas, but with a different attitude and with an acknowledgement that time has passed and the world isn't the same and we don't get what we want from nostalgia and never will. And, you know, I think that's quietly lovely. The movie
that's commendable
again,
in a way that
these
other legasequels don't tend to do.
Yeah.
Well, they're afraid to, because if you do that, then you kill it. You've murdered it. You can't do anything. If you acknowledge to the audience that the thing they want isn't going to be there, they have to hide it and wait for the last 5 minutes to deliver it. And, you know, that's good too, because then it becomes a different sort of reveal.
Yeah. Well, acknowledging that, you know, the original is not perfect, is the legasequel better than the original?
I liked it more as a grown man. Interesting. I don't know. Like,
I mean, the way you're selling it
both times.
Yeah. Sure. As you're selling it, though, it sounds like it's a more satisfactory experience because it's riding the coattails of a different thing in a weird way. Yeah. It's not trying to be Scream. It's trying to revisit this thing that was its own thing, but wasn't really its own thing. So, needless to say, like, you've sold me enough that I'm now intrigued to check it out. Whereas before I was sort of like, I'll get around to it maybe eventually when it's on, you know, deep discount or on Netflix or something. But
yeah, it's not going to be long. It'll show up pretty soon. It's Sony, right? So they have a deal with Prime that most of their stuff just gets spit onto Amazon fairly quickly. It will not be long, but it's perfectly fine. I was really surprised at the venom in some of the reviews, but again, like, if you go in expecting this is going to be garbage, because why would you ever make this movie? Yeah, you're probably not committing to, you know, listening to what it's trying to do. But there's something going on here. And Robinson is an interesting enough director. I mean, there was an attempt to remount it and relaunch the franchise in 2014 by Mike Flanagan that just never came to fruition. But I'd love to read what he was going to do.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
But barring, you know, a giant creative force coming in and completely taking it apart from the inside out, which, again, I don't think you could do with this one, because you basically just perform an autopsy on a slasher movie and all you get is more blood. Like, you won't get anything radical. And this isn't, like, what Robinson did isn't radical either, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds refined.
Yeah, from moment to moment, it's pretty entertaining. And it teases things and plays with things. And there's a sequence in a basically like a department store that's just really well choreographed and well handled, and it uses a fogged window well, and it plays fair-ish within the rules that it sets out for itself in terms of the scares, and there's just more going on. There's like, they know that it was a thin foundation or a weak foundation to launch from.
Yeah, when they announced it, I was just like, I could understand it being a reboot, like doing it again. But when they were like, oh, we're bringing back the characters from before, I'm like, how the hell is that going to work? Like, but the fact that they're acknowledging that does have me intrigued, and I'm curious how they handle that, and that does make me want to go, okay, maybe there's something here. So
yeah, it's making an effort. So I've become weirdly a booster for I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025. And also, honestly, Jennifer Love Hewitt is fun. She's enjoying herself. Like, they tease Julie now as the Jamie Lee Curtis character. Like, she's not a recluse exactly. She's a cool professor who wears a cult t-shirt under her blazer. She got away. She's doing something new. She and Ray did get married, but then they divorced, and they have an acrimonious, they've settled into just sort of tolerating each other. Again, it's a mirror on Courtney Cox and David Arquette's relationship in Scream, of course, Gale and Dewey. But again, they know that, and it's sort of derivative on purpose. And she's allowed to be a little smarter, a little sharper, and there is a really nice use of the catchphrase, which shouldn't work at all. Where Julie gets to do the "what are you waiting for" moment, but it's smart. It's Milhouse, right? She's going to say the thing. She's going to say the thing.
Right. That's great.
But they find a way to make it funny and also to land dramatically. Like, the jokes are all in character, which is the thing that Scream does. Yes. But the first Last Summer didn't have any space for that. And now it's basically saying, yes, this is what you think you want, and we can make that fun, but at the same time, you've seen this before. So let's see what new context or new configuration we can shape it into. I respect the effort.
That's very cool.
Well, on that note,